Thank you guys for letting me help you out by being here and get us through today. And on a happier note, happy birthday, John.
Birthday.
I want to start off by thanking staff, the department heads, and the finance department. You guys have been working since fall, getting that together, and the collective work for us to be physically responsible and good stewards of our community's resources. This is pretty much our first budget session for us as the commission. The manager is going to start off. I think there were some things he didn't get to cover Thursday, or if you had questions about what he sent out. Yeah, on the inquiries. And then after that, I want to recommend that we're going to share our ideas about what we want from the manager and the staff's work, which is now the manager's budget, into making this our budget. So we'll be going around sharing our priorities, and this will be voted on June 6th. We'll go around the table, and I want everybody to be sharing concise budget-related priorities, or so that we all hear what we've been thinking about or articulating. You'll get a second time to talk after everybody's had a time. So it will not interrupt people, but write down when you hear something you want to ask about for your next term. I do not interruptions that are going to involve us being on the right page of this book. You know, if somebody knows, just go ahead and say D12. My favorite are all the hotel motel pages, E7, B7, D9, but whatever can help us when we're talking, get to the page, it references what you're talking about. If anybody in the back has a book, or any of the staff can help us get to a page that we're talking about to help us all literally be on the right page. I think that's kind of how I want to just say how we'll get rolling. And then food and breaks as you need it. And Blaine, yes, we're at your part.
Well, I appreciate Commissioner Wright, you remembering me in the last meeting. And really, all I was going to do was try to address some of the questions that were on the floor at the time, get you feedback quicker. So, because I know that all of us involved in talking with each other. But I think we captured the questions that you have in the send out we sent yesterday. And I want to thank staff for compiling that. So really, I'll just say, if you have any questions about any of those, or if you want to follow Commissioner Wright's lead and we just kind of go through it and those issues come up as they will. But if there are any questions right now for me, I'm glad to entertain them. Otherwise, we'll follow your lead in the discussion. I will say this though. I do know staff did evaluate Commissioner Hamby's spreadsheet, and I think there were some questions about that to make sure that when we start to work on that at whatever time, that we make sure we're all saying the same thing. So that's it.
And that we can use projection as needed. I want to make sure everybody in the room knows the owl for this meeting, or the public being able to be with us, is the circle to the left of the slide screen. These black circles are speakers, so hopefully we're being heard while we're discussing in here. And how about at the break time, we talk about, or if you guys want to talk about now, Tuesday, our optional meeting for budget. Do we want to go ahead and see who might be here for that, or do we want to nail this down tonight? Does anybody want to just throw out their
Maybe we could finish the discussion, see where the discussion goes.
Okay.
I'm inclined to.
Before we leave tonight, we'll know what we want to do with that. Does that sound okay? All right. Okay, Dexter.
Can we, I like Manager Waitley's idea about the list that he sent us. Can we sort of just, unless there's some specifics, we just sort of maybe do a summary of that, Manager Williams, just talk about it, so then maybe that would start the discussion a little bit.
That might also be helpful, Commissioner Fisher, for people that are watching to kind of keep track of what we're talking about.
Right.
So I'll just run through it real quickly. Not that I'm going to explain everything, but I'll tell you the questions that we've answered, and then you let me know if you want to discuss it. If not, I'll move on to the next one.
Okay. And also, if it's a topic of concern, of priority for you, you can add it to your time for clarity or emphasize it.
Okay. So just to be clear to everybody, we collected questions from the previous two meetings that we've had regarding the budget. And one of the requests was a list of department and operating requests and additional positions that were requested but not included in the mayor's recommended budget. So you've been provided that document. There was a question about the vacancy data for all the departments, and you've been provided that document. There was a question about how much in additional property tax revenues estimated based on the preliminary tax digest approved by the Board of Assessors compared to the estimate and the recommended budget. So, and I know this might be confusing to a lot of folks, for just 30 seconds on this.
Yeah.
Is as the budget's being developed in the spring, where we are now, at the same time, the tax assessor is finalizing the tax digest projections. And that culminates with the tax assessor going to the state Department of Revenue and having that digest certified, which happens in July typically. So at the time that I've turned over my budget to the mayor, the draft budget, and met with you at Big Rocks, they had not finalized the tax digest. And so after I had turned it over to the mayor, and before it got turned over to you, the tax assessors let finance know, who let the mayor know, there was an extra $1 million projected in there. And so the mayor, in his recommended budget, there's an extra $1 million. Okay. And after he distributed that, the digest evolved a little bit further. And then we were all let know there was additional 3.7 in addition to that $1 million that's on the table. And that's part of what you're being discussed. So I think that was the budget there. Oh, the question there.
Wait, I have a question about the tax revenue and such, and whether or not you can give us information about where the additional taxes are coming from. And I just want to give this as an example because digging into my own neighborhood, I fall right in the median of where for property value. And the money on what I got for the estimate for what was coming to City Hall was down $350. What was up was $385 to the school district. And in fact, if I go back to 2007, when there was a homestead exemption on my house and it was valued at half, there's been $1,000 that's come to the school board, but only $200 to the county. And I know that's partially thanks, to the good homestead exemption we have in here. So obviously there's more money. The money isn't coming from me because I'm actually giving City Hall less money. So can you give us something like a rough thing here about where that extra money is coming from?
Sure.
Jeff, one of the assessors had that, so that could be done in an email. They have the new things that came online versus the reassessments.
And I don't want to, yes, and if I maybe, again.
You have it.
Hopes of, no, so it's either new construction or reassessments where the money's coming from, but I don't know if everybody knows that now, but we can get that information. And how could that happen? Go ahead, David.
Yeah, for people that have a home, you get to claim a homestead exemption. It would, the extra homestead exemption would have mitigated some of the increase. Mine did go up, but for businesses, commercial properties, industrial, they don't get homestead exemption. So they're the ones that pay a substantial portion of the increase.
So so even like my assessment went up by 40,000 for this year, which is way like 20% of the value. I don't know what it is, but it's a significant amount, but still it went down. So what I've been thinking is that if you're high in the higher end, that homestead exemption didn't make as much difference. Is that right?
Yeah. Okay. Does that help? And then we can get the exact numbers because I think we heard it at the podium, but it was a lot of numbers.
Yes. Okay.
And then, so the difference of what was reassessments versus new online January 1.
And one more point. So, and maybe that people that are watching, so of your property tax bill, roughly 60% goes to the school, roughly 40% goes to the county. And in this year, the school board has raised or is requesting to raise its millage rate, I think, 2 mills. And currently, the county is holding it steady at 13.1. Of course, it can appear like taxes can increase from reassessments, and y'all have heard all of that. So I think some people are like, well, all my money goes to the county. Well, no, it goes between
Right.
two entities, and it's so that there's a lot of dynamics going on there.
And the ratio has changed where a long time ago it was more like 48-51, and on my house, it's 63% to the Board of Education.
And I guess, yes, thank you.
And also for clarity from one of our speakers the other night, at 65, you automatically have your property tax frozen for the school district.
Right.
And so somebody said you have to apply for that, but there's not that one.
It freezes the value.
It freezes the value at that house.
Okay,
Keep
thank
going on,
you. Yes. Sure. There was a question about if Transportation and Public Works, I think this was Commissioner Hull's question, were provided additional funds for neighborhood traffic management and live stream pipe replacements, which is a stormwater. How much could they complete in the next year, and what would they prioritize? So, just real quickly, the top priority is our live stream replacement program, because as you know, we've had some failed stormwater segments that, where NTMP is definitely can be a safety issue. The failure of roads causes detours. In some cases, it could actually, cut off an only exit out of a neighborhood, and that's not good for emergency services. So, the 3 emergency failures that we've experienced this year, and we've experienced, I don't know, maybe a couple of dozen over the last few years, has depleted our current budgets for the program. So if there's another emergency failure in the next 12 months, and I don't want to jinx us, I'm pretty sure there will be. There's just no funding to address it. So we would estimate that $400,000 at the very least to complete a single mid-size replacement project would be in order, and one that was bigger could be $1 million or more. So $1 million might fund 1 to 3 projects on our prioritized program list going forward. With NTMP, staff believes that a deficit of $93,000 to fully fund the FY24 program, and as far as staff capacity, we would contract that out, or portions of that, to make sure that we could do it. So if you were to fund the $92,000 to fully fund the FY24 program, there is capacity to pull it off, whether it's us or contractors.
Can I ask just a quick follow-up question on that report back? Why did we see the decreased request from 800 to 200 for live stream pipe?
Because there's no available funding. So last year, there was a bigger fund balance. We asked for 800. This year, 200 is all it was. Pretty much depletes. So, yeah, doesn't change the urgency of it, just available resources. Okay, there was a question about what capital priority out of their Transportation Public Works General Fund capital request that did not get funded that staff would want to elevate. And again, even though it's not a general fund capital request, it is included in stormwater. Staff says, without a doubt, stormwater is our biggest concern. Some of the smaller capital requests would be helpful from a programmatic purpose. Consultant work to help create prioritized agencies for our capital improvement programs. We're going to get into life cycle, trying to do that, hiring interns to gather GIS data, things of those natures. Those types of expenses are traditionally outside the realm of T-SPLOS fund. But a lot of those funds are focused on actually doing projects, but there's some pre-project planning that needs to be done too. And for instance, the unfunded general capital sidewalk request of $40,000 is probably the best example of this. So, we equate, well, $40,000 goes into sidewalks, but there's a little planning that has to go ahead to set it up and understand what the projects are. Commissioner Hull just asked number 7, number 8, what would it cost to raise the wage floor up to $16.07 an hour? So the approximate FY24 cost for that would be about $60,000. That would be for affected positions, including vacancies. However, the impact of addressing this and the previous initial floor of $15.60 on the classification system has not yet been quantified, and that's something that we may want to look at, that we would like to look at if you fund the pay study later this year. Question was, what is the amount required to negate any additional health insurance premium cost over what employees paid in FY23? So an attempt to hold premiums constant for employees. And one thing I'd like to say too, in digging into this with staff, so we do have several different plan offerings. So when we talk about, I think some people will default to one plan offering and what that is. But the answer to your question is 50,000 in the general fund and 875 across all funds. So remember, we've got public utilities, and transit, and building inspection. So there's other funds outside of the general fund that have employees in them. And we would urge, if you do anything for employees, don't do it just for general fund, do it across all funds. And that led to a question, Commissioner Hull, if I might. Well, is there money in those other funds to absorb these across the board things we want to do? And that would be on a case by case basis, perhaps depending on A, what you're asking to do, the magnitude of it, B, which fund and what their relative fund balance is and what's committed. So if you want us to go further, if you come up with a consensus tonight, we'd like to do it. What can you pay for on the other funds? We can study that.
Question. One of the things we have been talking about, and I guess what we're doing, like, we're self-insured right now. A fact,
Health
right?
insurance, yes, sir.
So does it not make, to explore the possibility if we was to partner with other counties, I'm just throwing that out, other counties around the state, possibly help us get a better rate to possibly lower our costs? Yeah, is that something that we can maybe explore and take a look at? It can help us down the road.
So I want to qualify that. Do you want us to try and figure that out for this budget year, or you suggest we study that for the next budget year?
Well, yeah, we're probably too
I'm not
late.
being funny. It's too late.
It's probably too late, but healthcare keeps going up and it's gonna continue to go up. I mean, I'm convinced of that. But it seems to me if we got more people at the table, and more people paying in besides York County, I think we get better rates and can possibly help our employees lower their cost of what they're paying. But I'll just give you a perfect example, because that's what I know. Years ago, university was self-insured on the UGA. And because we were that, it was forced upon us, but the region said everybody's gonna be in one bucket. But my cost went down. It was 32 schools. My cost went down. Now there was several funds we can pick from. There's Blue Cross, Kaiser, different ones you can pick from. But my cost actually went down for my family at that time. So again, like the more people you got, you'll be a little bit more competitive. And we may can't do it this year, but I think in the future, that's something we really need to really take a look at.
And we did have a previous comparison. I'm not sure how dated it would be, if that was worth sharing when we did that last. And we could send that out and get a look and get ahead of that idea for next year.
Yeah,
sure.
But I agree with us doing something to help out with how it's more.
And that question's come up, and I think staff's responded to that, but I think I hear y'all saying you want a little more thoughtful analysis, and possibly from Epic that, Jeff, we could just have them write it up for us, or Commissioner Rice referring to something that was done more recently.
I can't remember when it was, because I've asked it before and you had done, I remember there was a work session, but it could be totally out of date by now.
We were asked to look at ACCG, which we provided some feedback as to why that's not a viable option for us in terms of reducing costs. The school district is a state entity. As far as combining with other counties, that's not something we've looked at, been advised of as an option. That's that.
Okay, well, the ACCG information would be helpful for all of us.
I like to see it, yeah.
And GMA, we're members of that one too, but it's an important topic for us to help our employees go on.
So here's what I would suggest. We'll send that out. If that doesn't meet your satisfaction, we can, engage with a consultant to give a more, detailed response to that so that you can satisfy.
Does our insurance renew in July 1st? So, I mean, if our insurance renewing mid-year or something like that, it probably would be
January 1.
okay.
So if I'm following you, theoretically, you could make some decisions. Well, I don't know. There's got to, like, you couldn't make a decision on December 31st or January 1st in here. But, there may be
So
some,
that's why you have it that way, though, is you make the budget decision, then you have all the renewal stuff. So it goes.
that's right.
Okay.
That's exactly perfect.
All right, next one.
And that's really kind of takes us to the next, what is the amount required to right size the county employee share of premiums or the benchmarking exercise? And so if you'll remember at the March work session, HR Human Resources presented a variety of alternatives to try and, things we can invest in to try and bring some relief to employees and to the costs that we're experiencing. And one of those was that our consultant Epic did a benchmarking study looking at other local governments and the share, the split between the employees and the government, and found that maybe we were a little high on benchmarks where employees were paying more than their peers in these other comparable jurisdictions. And so it's not in the budget now, but to answer the question, it would be it's $415,000 for FY24. Now remember, that's a January 1 start date. You're on a July 1st budget, so that's only for 6 months. So then when you do something like that, you sort of commit us to the next year. So it'd be an $800,000, extra $400,000 there. But overall, if you wanted to right size it immediately and not wait 3 years, and remember the 2.6 million to right size it to get us within benchmark is today's dollars. Next year might be more, so 2.66 million to get there. The cost to establish, go ahead, Carol.
Could you clarify for me the difference between how the 650 and number 9 does that have any impact on the numbers in number 10?
Well, I don't know that the intricate connection there. I mean, you could grossly assume it's a down payment against that. Because
And there's a growth factor that's accounted for in 10 that you're not really dealing with in 9. So the reason why 9 is more expensive is 10's assuming that there's a 7% increase every year in health insurance, right? So that's built in. But 9 is just saying to hold it till last year, which is why it's higher.
Okay.
Next.
Okay. The cost to establish and administer an employee health clinic. So there's a capital cost, which is fairly minimal. I think we had $100,000. And, we haven't explored this with the property committee, but there may be a place that we already own that we could put a clinic in that might be helpful. But based on the attached documentation you've been provided, the estimated annual operating cost range between $500,000 and $720,000 approximately. And with a $100,000 one-time build-out cost. And that could include, if we can't find something we can use, and there's going to be some leasing costs associated with that as well.
And what's the number of our employees who would be eligible to use that?
Well, that's a good question, and I haven't had time to follow up with Director Hale. But somebody posed a question, well, even if the employees weren't on our health insurance, could they still participate? So that's something I need to run down with HR and give you a response in our second iteration.
And that topic, after the work session, when you asked for feedback, that topic came back as a high priority from our body? Because you had asked
last meeting.
At the work session where the consultant gave us all those options. You
Yes,
said for
that's right.
everybody to chime in, and you're saying that one came up as a high priority from the body?
Yes, and we've engaged the consultant for a couple of years now, and it seems like the return, the more that health insurance goes up, the return on investment looks more attractive. And anecdotally, in talking with employees, the ability to go see a provider, not pay a big copay, perhaps get some pharmacy there, maintenance medications, if you will, for little or no cost, you know, anecdotally, that seems very attractive to some that I've talked to.
Yeah, well, and there also could be our partnerships with all the different providers in the community. It could be that we're educating them on other places to go as well. But that one's a big one. That's a big rock, that topic. So let's, are these still questions based on the same
Yeah,
topic?
it's based on the health, yeah, I mean, I was just curious about the cost benefit analysis, and you say that there seems to be some evidence of cost benefit
Well,
over.
from what I remember last year, it's better this year than it was last year.
Okay, and also I was
Numbers.
thinking exactly what Allison brought up as far as partnering, like, have we talked about exploring a partnership with like Athens Neighborhood Health Center, or like
Yeah.
that's
And
fun
Board
there,
Health
or
and-
there, and
Resources. So
I mean, if y'all want to make it a priority to progress to that, we can.
I think that would be a wise move if they're already set up and already serving the community.
all right, Patrick,
Yes, it's on.
I know you like this idea.
I love it. Fayette County, please, if I got it wrong, I'm sorry, but at the ACCG annual conference, that county was given an award for implementing this program, a program similar to this. They did research that people tend to work more, they didn't call in as much. The retention rate was better, and I don't know how the hospitals or the providers track this, but they said the overall health of the employees throughout the county was a lot better. So, and they're on their second year or third year of doing this. So I highly recommend that in the future we look into this, because
And they got an award from ACG because of that, so that could be something we could look at some of their numbers if it's comparable, but also with us having two hospitals. I'm not sure if it's apples and oranges versus what's in our community.
It's true.
Well, just like the sheriff asking for a compliance person associated with healthcare for 400 individuals, I would say that there ought to be a position required for HR, for potentially 1,700 lives, or more, depending on how we treat the dependents. So just that's part of this too.
Yes.
Not surprising.
Yeah, that's a big rock.
Yeah.
For sure, big rock. Okay, can we move on to the next topic?
Absolutely.
Okay,
This is pretty quick. What are the costs for changes in employee compensation? So the cost to increase the unified, and this, when I say unified pay plan, that is non-public safety employees. The pay table by 1% is 50,000 in the general fund and 115,000 all funds. And that's not a lot of money, but remember, that's raising minimums of the pay table. So those aren't folks that are really working with us yet. Now, we would suggest to you that you do the market pay a little slightly more than the pay table, so that if you did the pay table more than market, somebody could basically leapfrog somebody else. The cost to do market pay by 1% is 290,000 in the general fund, 500,000 in all funds. And the cost to increase the public safety step table 1% is 275,000 general fund, 285,000 all funds.
Could you repeat the first one for the,
Pay table unified plan, 50,000 general fund, 115 all funds.
okay.
yes to B and C.
Appreciate you giving us that differentiation between the general fund and the all funds. Okay, has everybody got the numbers that we needed on that? Okay.
Well,
So we're on 14. No, sorry, 13. As I mentioned in the very initial meeting, that staff found a miscalculation. So in order to account for the increases in fleet size and escalating costs as presented in my initial budget, we need to add an additional $321,000 for that. The maintain pays for full funding the next 8 to 10 years. So remember, we had a 10-year plan to get the fleet where we needed to get to. And those are installments along the way, $321,000 short.
What would that'll be? 321.
And that's just central services, right?
That's
Yep,
additional to
that's-
go, what would the,
That's the fleet replacement contribution. So
they take care of the fleet for all the,
I've got public safety and everybody.
they do. Now, there's some pieces of equipment, maybe there's a and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but like, for instance, solid waste may have a big piece of equipment at the landfill that lives within their budget and not there, but most everything was in fleet replacement. So 3 fire apparatus needed in the near future. So I think you've seen those charts that we've shared. These are big ticket items. We try and run them as much as we can. I've heard from the firefighters with all the extra medical calls in recent years, we're putting more hours on them more quickly. And of course, as you know, in the last meeting, you voted to buy a $2.2 million ladder truck. And that's a lot more than it used to cost. So staff is relaying that an additional 1.8 million is needed to meet these commitments to go ahead and replace 1 hazmat vehicle and 2 engines in FY24. Without that, our choices are to delay replacement, reduce the apparatus size or function, or forego other critical needs, or try and utilize some lease purchase agreements. So there's that.
Melissa has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, do we have any estimates on what kind of revenue intake we might gain if we were to implement a fire safety fee on larger scale structures?
We have not done a lot of work on that because I don't know if that's a consensus of the commission, but we can certainly do that.
I'm just interested to see what some comparable communities might be pulling in.
But that's not something we can implement in 6.6.
No, I'm
It
just
will
saying, like,
include, but if we-
exploring, understanding these huge impacts on our budget, that, absolutely necessary need for this equipment.
Well, I think it is legal. I think technically you could do that. The comparable communities, it would be based on, how big the district is and what they're charging for it. I mean, it's possible to generate the revenue to do that. And there are other university towns that have a partnership with the university to help provide those types of things. But before we spend a lot of time on it, let's recognize that it might be a bit of a political issue. So staff would just like some direction on that from the group.
And we do get $1 in your lease, or was it fire hall 7? Something that's over there. Mike had his hand up, he hasn't surprisingly talked yet, and then Patrick's got his hand up.
I'm big, big in the location I get. The lease purchase agreement, I don't remember seeing any price tag on that option for the parts. I noticed in here, have we bought the $2.2 million truck yet? I know we approved it, but have we bought it?
No, we put the order in. It's going to take 2 years for them to build it.
So is that something we can go back and revisit, lease purchase, arrange that?
Well, so there's, from a lease purchase,
It seems like
it's not getting any cheaper. In fact, you're paying a little carrying cost, but you're spreading it out over several years. And I know that in the past, and I'm not sure if we do this with the fire trucks, but we've used the Georgia Municipal Association lease purchase pool, where they give us a very favorable interest rate, and they, usually they won't spread it more than 3 or 5 years, depending on what type of equipment. Are we still utilizing that program, or would we with this new?
Yeah, they'll go 17 now.
Okay. But we intend to try and utilize that where we can, or are we purchase them outright?
No, I've pushed to using these cheap financing methods.
But it's a purchase, not a lease though, right?
But we looked at that earlier when we had a big group of them, and it didn't make sense financially. But the thing about this one, Commissioner Hamby, is this is for FY24. There's 2 more apparatus and coming on that we would need in FY25. And so conceivably, some portion of those 5 we could do a capital lease for, but to do one for all 5, I think would be too expensive. But 2 of them out of the 5, maybe.
I'm just looking at this year.
Yeah, I know you're looking at this year, but we're thinking about 25. And so if there's a way to think about both those years.
And also think about, next T-Splosh, we'll be honest, within 3 years as well. So, some of these long-term projects, like fleet replacement, could be part of a T-Splosh program.
We can look in the eligibility of that. I know that the public safety vehicles are part of the general spot. I'm not sure we have that in the T-Splosh. But we can check that.
Mike, were you done on that topic?
Yeah.
Mike.
So with the lease purchase, you're only having to budget that 1 year payments, correct?
Yes.
So you're not having to budget the entire $2 million.
Well, when you sign that agreement, you're budgeting it for that however many years you're going to extrapolate it out.
If you're only putting it in, whatever the lease payment is, say it's $100,000 with the payments for that year, that's only going on that year's budget.
That's right.
Correct?
But then you're committing 100,000 in ensuing budget.
Right, but it's saving you money each year if you're not having to do it all at one time. So we did a $2.1 million for this fire truck. We're not gonna have it for 2 years. So, but we have it on this year's budget?
Well, yes. And we usually we won't sign a contract unless we know we have the money to do it.
Okay.
And, you know, in a way, you're committing future
Right.
governments for that, or commissions.
But
And when you do that, you know, you're just taking that future new revenue off, you know.
But if you did it, so if we got 2 years to pay for it, we did half this year and half next year, you're gonna have the funding. Instead of having the big hit of $2 million, you save $1 million.
That's right. And I think that's in keeping with what Assistant Manager Edwards was saying. You know, it's good to look at this in terms of 2 or 3 years because there's obligations being committed. So we can do it either way.
Is that an option for this year too? Even though the thing's already been ordered?
So we're not gonna pay until we get delivery in the truck, right? So that, think about it in terms of a savings account, we're setting aside that money. And we told the builder that we have the money. Right, we got a 2-year period. We're gonna pay that bill in 2 years. And so it all depends when the fire truck's done is when we'd actually expend the money. We looked at that ladder truck and all these that we're talking about right here and 2 more. And the cost is not financially viable when you look at the interest. We're open to looking at some portion of this, and we actually have a meeting on the calendar with fire and central services to talk about these out years, and that is an option. But it's always better to put cash if you've got it and not pay interest. So that's why we're.
But we're not, if we just line item $1 million for this year and $1 million for next year, we're not paying interest on anything because we haven't put any money down on the thing.
That's right. So we're putting aside now. Yes, when the trucks come due, conceivably, if you keep putting money aside, one funding option is to do a capital lease at that point. But
Where is that in this budget? That is high.
so there's a supplemental funding, which is what we used last year, right? So y'all added, I think it was what, 1.8 million, so 2 million in supplemental funding. There is supplemental funding in this FY24 budget, but it hasn't been designated per se about what we use that for.
Where is it in the book?
Is there a page number for that, or that topic? Does anybody?
Could find it for y'all.
I don't know if my question.
Fleet replacement, is that what he's talking about, the 2 million for fleet replacement?
Yeah.
Under supplemental, but it's fleet supplement. Anybody has a page number, we'd love to learn it. And Carol, was that your second?
Well, it's actually
Let's see,
related to that. Let me see the answer.
see what we find.
B16.
B16 has,
What is it?
B16 has a bullet point on, fleet replacement.
B.
B.
Point 16.
It's this budget.
Fleet, third bullet down. Is that
I think
addressing it?
I think I'm kind of confused by that, and I'm looking under the capital for central services and then also the fire department and how it fits in with that, but maybe someone could explain that later, or because there's also on D53, a fire apparatus replacement ladder 7 that we have, out budgeted, not this year, but in the next couple of years. So is that one of those trucks, or is that?
57?
Yeah,
Thank you.
D53.
53, okay.
3. Because I was looking at them for central, like Mike and.
Yeah, those are the projected, none for this one.
Right, so but those ones that Mike was referring to, I don't, they're here, but they're not in those other places, so one of these years I'll figure it all out.
Y'all took care of these seven. This is proposed out years. So this is just an extra page that's in there for out years.
For the upcoming.
Right, this is not in the budget.
Yeah.
Right, but those other than on page B16, you don't see the money that's referred to in number, like what Mike is referring to in number 14, the 1.8 million.
Oh, they're not connected. That's what I'm telling you. So
Okay.
I was talking about last year where y'all designated
Oh, right.
part of that 2 million for the ladder truck that you just.
Oh, yeah.
I was just using that as an example.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was last year.
Yeah.
That was.
Does that help everybody? Carol, you had another page with a central service question related.
No, I was just, let's just go on. I just don't know why it's not in the other pages and it's only on B16, so that's what's gonna happen for this.
Oh, all right.
It's actually request, why wasn't it like a enlisted? in the
Yeah,
capital
you're
request?
wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, buying down the 10-year plan, I referenced complete replacement. Central Services let us know for each 500,000 you invest now, it reduces the need to increase the annual replacement funding by 62,500 per year in the 10-year plan. So for example, 20 million we just talked about, if you add that for fire apparatus, we reduce the fleet contribution growth required FY25 through FY32 or 7 years by $225,000 per year. So if you wanted to buy down the future liability that we've identified and trying to rectify with a 10-year horizon, that's an opportunity.
Like paying your mortgage in advance? Okay.
Yes.
Carol, is that helping you with that other question as well? A little bit, a little bit. Okay, so we'll keep going down the list?
Yep.
Okay.
Just a couple more. For IT, you know, and I want y'all to remember, this extra 4.7 million I didn't have when I put mine together. And so I had to go through and cut things that were asked for. And sometimes that's a very tactical thing and sometimes it's a bit more of a bludgeon. And IT let me know that some of the money that I had tried to balance capital with, because there was, you know, y'all, you're talking 25, 30 million in requests, and we're only kind of used to be only 5 or 6 million. Now we're trying to get closer to 7 or 8 or 9. So IT let me know, like, look, the shortfalls that we have, you know, are going to be an issue in trying to refund or replace computers that need to be replaced. And what I didn't appreciate at the time, and I do now, is that in a couple of years, Windows 10 end of the life is going to happen. And that's going to affect 600 computers that we have. And so those are going to, you know, 900 overall need to be replaced in order to meet Microsoft's hardware requirements to run Windows 11, you know, in the upcoming couple of years. So they're predicting a $480,000 shortfall based on what was received, recommended.
Patrick?
Quick question. Is it for the FY23 year, calendar year? Or it says 2 years, 24 or 25? What is that?
Well, that's for both 23 and 24. So what's already happened, they've got a shortfall. And now with my recommended budget, I'm just adding to that shortfall. So they're already short 200 grand. And my recommendation, which stood in the mayor's budget, shorted them another 280. So overall, between last year and this year, we're short about $500,000 towards replacing those computers.
Which is the Windows 10 that doesn't expire or wrap up for a couple of years anyway. So we're just, again, trying to keep ahead of something, but it's not time yet.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. You know, you just don't know what's going to happen next year, right? And so do you want to try and take a good year and spread out costs and create obligations in the future? Do you want to try and go ahead and attack head on some of the shortfalls that we have? You know, that's the priority question.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. Wait a minute. John, Patrick. Okay.
So the 400 that y'all got in the budget is not enough?
That's right. They asked for six, well, the total needed, they say, is 680 in 2024, and 400 is what was granted.
But some of that being for a future cost that we know is happening.
Could you do a lease on computers? I mean, because if they're gonna get outdated, when they'll be updated, I mean, then we'll have to do the same thing. What if you did a lease on computer equipment?
We can give you a response on that.
Good point.
That was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Also, this chart on the next page clarifies something for me. If I read this chart, it's saying, oh, they're saying the 200 was from last year. Okay,
Yeah, we
224.
did fund them last year.
Got it.
Again, it was down the road.
It was
We're on
already
this
short.
road. And
Okay.
so that's, again, learning the information all together and then deciding what our priorities are with what we have at hand. And
Okay.
Well, and I would say that, not unlike y'all's deliberations on a SPOS or T-SPOS, rarely does the project get fully funded. You're just trying to make it all work. And there's a lot of different priorities out there. So, okay. How much funding, what's the source of funding for the community events program administered by the Downtown Development Authority in FY24? And the mayor's recommended budget includes $120,000 for the CEP program, or the community events program. And that's funded from the hotel motel tax special revenue fund. And what the mayor's proposing is a $20,000 increase over the FY23 amended budget.
next one.
The millage rates in surrounding counties and how do those compare to the tax rate? And I will say that I really appreciate a document that finance puts together. And it's called Budget and Brief, and you may have seen that. And there's a lot of great just information for somebody who's not steeped in all of this. And so there's that kind of looks at some of our immediate neighbors, but I appreciate finance. There's an ACCG report, and I know it's pretty detailed, but you can see it all right there. And it also captures some of the schools too, so you can see what that looks like for all the different counties.
And that little book is the one that is half of, folded this size.
That's
It's going to be hot pink like our big old book. So those are in the clerk's office.
And what that does, y'all, so I just say that that's a different and probably a more digestible just for some immediate counties. So like, for instance, it'll look at Oconee, and remember, we're a unified government. So they're gonna have Watkinsville people are gonna pay both a city and a county tax and a school tax. So all of that's kind of normalized to compare to us. And so I think that's very helpful.
And they also have about the same kind of fire department set up as well.
And then Matt, Justice, puts together a report each year in March. Got you there. Melissa got me the other day. That's very helpful too, and we shared that with y'all.
Okay.
And I think that's all the questions y'all had. Everything else are attachments. So we'll be collecting your questions tonight, and if we have to, we'll put out another.
Well, hopefully tonight we can share with each other our priorities, whether it's let's stick with what we can do right now for this year. Mindful, we want to start talking more about leasing. As far as what we just heard, a lot of that's financial philosophy. But we are at the point we need to be sharing with each other our priorities and how we can be ready for. We want the public to know what we're prioritized on, because we have one more taxpayer bill of rights. It's going to be before our mammoth wedding. Yes, meeting on 6/6. So we want them to know how we're prioritizing the public input that we've got. So we'll be going around and just share our things.
One more clarifying question.
Yeah.
Presenting.
Go ahead. On the list.
Am I understanding correctly that a 1% adjustment for performance pay would be the same as a 1% adjustment for market? Like, it's just instead of it being flatly applied to everyone, department heads would have discretion on how to apply it. So if we wanted to bring the performance pay from 1 to 2 and keep market pay at 4, we could do that.
For non-public safety employees, is that pretty even math, Jeff?
Yeah, not because of comings and goings and who's eligible, it works out.
Okay.
Yes, roughly.
Yeah, I follow up on that. On the step plan, I want to go to the public safety side. Once a person has reached their max at their step, they get any more money. suppose if it's 7 steps within the category in public safety, and that person make the 7th step, and they maxed out.
And let me say too, that, that issue, I don't think would be unique to a step plan. That might also, you might also find it when you hit the top of the pay range here. Jeff, how would you address that?
As long as you keep moving structure, the table, that will build in room for them to.
Okay, say we got 7 step plans. You get the number 7. Now I just use a hypothetical number. Number 7, the top of that step is 50,000. Okay, I'm still here. I'm at the top of my ladder. Do I get any more increases moving forward?
If you grant it, so for instance, if you were to say in this budget, we want to elevate the public safety pay table, the structure 3%, and anybody that was theoretically at the very end will get up 3%. Because you're moving the whole boat up for everybody. Fair?
Otherwise, if you, for example, if I'm capped out like you described.
Right.
If and you grant a 3% table move, I might get a flat amount. It doesn't affect my base pay until that table moves, percentage increases and that.
See, well, another problem for me. Well, if people looking at trying to retire, and you give them a bonus and everything, it don't help their income. I mean, you get that one-time fee, but if you count out and you're a good employee, got excellent evaluations, I guess what I'm trying to say, can the director of that department, if it is a good employee, and although they tapped out, they get any money at all?
Well, isn't the same phenomena true with our other pay? So that happens regardless if you're in the public safety plan or not, what Jeff just said. It's just the top of a pay range and that's what happens there.
We don't pay beyond the maximum pay range. That's the valuation of the particular function or job. And from a stewardship point of view, we don't want to pay too much or too little for the function or the job. And so
I get that, no, but if I'm doing a great job, I'm getting great evaluations. It seems like I should be rewarded though, regardless if you're gonna go over that. Yeah, if we're not doing that, then there's something wrong with that.
Well, one avenue is promoting. So we hope that folks will promote up if they're performing at that high a function. And so that's,
Part of the stuff.
it's not the intent of that structure. It's just a byproduct of that structure. But one alternative somebody has is they could promote to gain a new pay range.
Okay, so does that clarify what you were wondering about how that worked?
It don't, but.
I mean, you might not agree, it might not suit you, but
Yeah, it
you get
does.
clarity.
Yes.
So that is a topic that maybe we need to go deeper into.
But he brought that up and it's not quite clicking in my head because I didn't imagine that. So as that this is the case. So, and I'm comparing this to sort of state employees coming from that world. In the state employees, I just got, well, whatever you call it, cost of living increase. That just came up and I could get that. If I was there for 30 years, I'd get whatever was there. But you're saying, and it would affect my retirement income. And so this just so I can understand it. So with Clarke County, I'm there for, I get some, I just had someone whisper in my ear that I get a check like a bonus, but it doesn't affect my salary rate for my retirement.
Right.
Okay.
Unless the table changes.
Right, unless the table changes. So when we're changing these pay tables, it does, but not the other part of it. Okay.
That's what the pay table increase is recommended.
Okay, that's just,
Okay, all right.
new knowledge.
All right, are we ready to go around and share priorities so that we can address what we want, just our priorities? We can start on one side or we can, who wants to start? Who wants to kick it off?
I mean, Mike sent us a spreadsheet. Should we ask him to explain?
Yeah, Mike's there.
You guys good with that? I think
Yeah,
we can
yeah.
display the, so,
Big version of.
Commissioner Hamby.
yeah, you want, if
Adulterated.
y'all want to start with that so we can talk through.
We'll start and end with this.
We'll see how it looks
I
on.
don't know about ending, but I got,
See how that looks.
I got some clarifying questions.
Copy of that.
Okay, we'll take it from that side.
I need one.
Okay.
Oh, it's in color. I have one too. I had some of our admin help
I
me.
follow
with
your
this.
advice.
I got you.
Yeah, I got you.
Thank you.
See, she's ready.
I think.
I've got it on my computer.
I got it.
Y'all has changed. I wasn't sure you emailed it. Does everybody have it over
You
here?
trying to save the paper, man.
Okay,
I don't have a.
you're pulling it up. We're getting the screen warmed up.
I'm pulling up a different one that I can pull up that exact one.
If you want to go ahead and pull up the ones that you.
Thank you.
That's our version. Cleaned a couple of things up, but if you.
That's fine. It's, I don't.
And now for the public doesn't see the screen, right?
Not yet.
But that's, oh, and you can do that too. That's awesome. All right, thanks. Perfect. Did anybody back here want?
That exact one. Bear with me. This one. This is the one you sent.
Go back to the one you.
Just some notes and stuff that are a little,
Yes.
a few things.
So you want to walk us through this, Mike?
Which one, would you prefer yours to?
Why don't we go through mine first and then y'all can correct me if I say something wrong.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, so we'd like looked at that one first.
Okay. And y'all, what, everybody here? Here.
Yeah, blame, I think he'll be back. We're good, we're good to go?
I need to make sure y'all can see this.
We also got the.
I'll share it with the public.
And just for new commissioners that Mike, this is Mike's favorite part.
Is this Zoom good for y'all? Can everybody see it?
Spreadsheet. So it does prove, I think, to be a good starting point. He does listen when we talk and stuff in budgets and uses that to put that kind of thing together.
And y'all just keep in mind as we're going through this, that these are just changes to the budget, this budget book right here. So it's either increased or decreased or added to. So it's not, if you don't see it on this list, it's and some of these may be added to what's in this list. So for example, the fully fund library request, that's an additional $220,000 beyond the $75,000 increase that was in the budget. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you see up there, we're, trying to achieve at least a $1 million reduction of $6.5 million in order to, and these are just going through some other revenues that could help, additional revenues that could help make that happen. We use an additional fund balance use. This budget has about $35 million left over as we ended last year with $45 million. I think this budget includes a $10 million use of that fund balance use, and this here reflects an additional $439,000 to that $10 million in fund balance use. Digest change from recommended budget, as we learned last at one of the meetings we had here recently. It's a $3.7 million extra from the tax digest, property taxes from that. Parking change, on-street parking. Y'all know ADDA managed the on-street parking, but the county gets 80% of that parking change, and that's our on-street parking produces about $250,000 a year in revenue. But I just put down here the county portion because that's what would generally be reflected in the budget. There's a fund balance in the hotel motel tax of about almost $400,000. Some of that's committed, but there is some that's not committed. So that's about $300,000 maybe. So we use of the hotel fund balance for $150,000. And also within this, we looked at adding a little bit more additional ARPA dollars. Remember in the ARPA spreadsheet there's $2.2 million that's in there for FY23 to FY27 to help with budget items. The mayor uses $900,000 in his budget, so we increase it to we increase that to $2.1 million. There's also $600,000 line item in the ARPA spreadsheet for contingencies. So it's a contingency. And there's, there's other items in there too that could help support this. Yes, sir.
That would be a total of 2.2 million.
2.2 million.
900,000.
You're right. I'm sorry. So, but anyway, we ignore that 2.1 million, just focus on the 1.3 million. So, yeah.
Mike, is that just on that, when it says added ARPA transfer total from homeless and BD?
Well, I put homeless up there because you'll see here in a minute that we do utilize some of the expenditures for some homeless initiatives. So whether or not it comes from the homeless ARPA pot or the budget balancing part, it makes no difference.
The transfer into the budget, that.
Right.
Okay.
And Commissioner Hamby, at the appropriate time, once you get through, let's talk about that contingency of ARPA and make sure that we're all.
Sure. Yeah, I figured you'd want to say something about that.
Thank you, sir.
Among other things. And looking at this budget, we were just trying to meet some of the community needs and also address, the manager has some needs as well. So we don't want to, we weren't trying to detract from that. We were just trying to meet the needs of the community, the needs of certainly people that have weighed in on a property tax and such as that. So, and some of the.
A second, just when you're saying we, so I'm just curious, like who is working on this?
I'm just saying we, as just like they. We, they. So fully fund library request, $220,000. That enables them to receive their full request. State court coordinator, we heard Judge Ostrander talk about how this would be helpful, and I think it would be to help coordinate. And I just put 6 months down here just because it would take some time to advertise and hire. Yes.
Is this the AB position?
No, that's not the AB position.
So we're not talking about hiring that AB position?
I just looked at it specifically from the AB, and I heard the judges say our IT guys do a good job. So, trying not to work in silos, and our IT guys can help them maybe this. And there's room in here for adding that if we wanted to. Certainly, I was trying to focus on the aspects of the state court and the public defender increase.
If that's something, make sure you write that down to come back around to. Because if that's something you heard the other night and it's not on here, that I'd like everybody to do that so we can modify. I mean, like, does everybody want to do that library request? I mean, I think
Can I finish first?
Yeah,
Yeah, because it all kind of fits together. So the state court coordinator, 6 months, public defender increase at $75,000. That meets their request, and plus a little bit more. Solicitor, half a year increase helps him get. He had $80,000 for 2 positions. He wasn't real sure about it, so I put $100,000 for half a year for both of those positions, be it investigator and oh goodness, what was the other one? A victim advocate. Yeah. And then neighborhood leaders program. I didn't see any. I think we were going to get some information about their new contract.
Yes.
And I just put in here a $50,000 increase to help cover whatever anticipated raises they may have. It may be more, maybe less, but employee health care benefit. This was looking at, I should have put on here across all funds, but I'm just using numbers for the general fund budget here, but just know it means all funds. $165,000 for the general fund gets us freezing at 223 level and starts us to work on that benchmark. What do we call that? What is it? The word?
The health insurance premium benchmarks, yeah.
Right size. That's the word.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
Sorry, I got that wrong.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So that number equals freezing and the $400,000 for right sizing just in the general fund. So we need to address it within all funds, enterprise funds as well. Ethics tutorial increase. This is what I heard Dexter talking about. So that's an increase of $20,000. Housing flex funds. That's a $400,000. It seems to be something that Cloudburst is going to recommend as a strategy for us. So, and I know that Athens Area Homeless Coalition has been discussing it as well. So just go ahead and get it up and running. Homeless street outreach, currently there's 2 that work within Advantage, that do a good job. Add an additional 2 here for I guess, at $100,000. So I don't know if that, they could probably start a half a year with that, or do what they can for $200,000 at this point. Capital projects, there's a list of capital projects that total $812,000. Victim mental health counseling, $150,000. This violent crimes, mental health counseling, just to add an additional layer of support for victims of violent crime. But put RFP there, however you decide to do it. Okay, you can scroll down and be real quick here. Uneducated ballot funds, this is what I was looking at within the budget here. As y'all know, the mayor put in $1 million. So in this budget, in order to meet some of the needs here, I take that $1 million back out to reflect that we're using that $1 million somewhere. But you see where I'm going. I didn't want to duplicate that $1 million. So, and then
So you're saying that reduce operating contingency. Line number 41 is the $1 million, no, wait a minute. Number 32 is what the mayor mentioned in his summary about leaving $1 million in there for the commissioners to do.
Right.
Basically budgeted that in contingency.
Okay.
Increased contingency from 1.2 million to 2.2 million.
Okay.
Okay, I read it differently, that it was.
I think this, the way you have it, is double counting that.
Yeah.
Dollars.
So either 32 or 41 needs to come out for this.
Well, see, it wasn't reflected that way in the budget, is what I'm saying. It's reflected as though Kelly put in $1 million here, but it wasn't clear that $1 million was in the contingency amount. So it's really not. Okay, I got you now. So, okay, we can fix that.
So
I don't get that.
So either 32 or 41 has to be deleted for this to work out.
Okay. And then
So where that's,
facilities life cycle maintenance decrease. See, that was in central services, and I think we loaded it. He was asking for Kelly put in here. It's life cycle maintenance. Mayor recommended $3 million for the past 2 years. It's been at $1 million. So and they were recommending, they were asking for $1 million for FY23. They got $1 million, and FY24 it's $3 million. So we kind of subtracted some of this and got down to subtracted about $500,000 to give it 2.5, which is still $1.5 million more than they received last year.
D24, if anything, with that.
Thank you.
D24, yeah.
what is that?
D24.
Is what?
And Tim, if you would, if you don't mind, if you do know those, if you just add them in there in parentheses next to the line items.
The page
We
number, that would
have
be
it
helpful.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm sorry, I should have put those. I should have put the
Okay,
pictures
that's fine.
on.
We can make those.
I wouldn't put it in. Chris told me to do
Even though,
it. 23 or 24. Each one, I'll take credit.
fleet replacement, I'm looking at D24.
Yeah. So,
And then you also look at the fleet management's not far from here. It's still in D23. FY23, we budgeted 4.7 million. Mayor's recommended 4.8. And FY25 proposed is 3.7. And I do hear what the manager's saying. I will say this, and what we do is take it 4 million, which kind of sets it in line for all the succeeding years. But if y'all will recall, there is a SPOS project number 8. It's a public safety vehicle program for 2020. Currently, after all the encumbrances, what we spent already, there's still $4.2 million left in that fund. And I'm sure there's some uses for it, but it doesn't indicate that in the SPOS. budget as of yet.
Can I ask a quick clarifying question?
Sure.
So the timeline that you're talking about for both facilities and fleet life cycle and replacement, does that timeline assume full use of this lost monies already and keeping on the trend that's reflected in here?
Yes,
So we'd be extending that, if we go with this method, we'd be extending that timeline essentially.
well, basically, so, if I might, Commissioner Hamby, so the request for the public safety vehicle funding was not approved at the full amount. No surprise there, as we've established that that's typically happening. And basically, initially, when you set the SPOS budgets, it was pretty much prorated across, and remember, it's a 12-year program. It really depends on how much revenue comes in. And so it's just sort of some money to help buy down. And in the first 2 years, since the commission knew that was coming, that they did not put any capital funds towards public safety. So we went down in the hole a little bit. So we're playing catch up with some of those initial public safety funds. So yes, technically you can spend it now. It just means it's going to be less later.
Well, and you could also, what we also could do is revisit the timeframe for SPOS. And if we needed to move some of the dollars that are far out from and within the 2020 SPOS closer to now, so that the police department could receive the vehicle, spend money sooner rather than later.
That could be worth revisiting for SPOS.
The tiering program, right.
To help us out with this.
So, and that's, we can get into a whole discussion about
Sure.
that later. The other one is the ACD consultant for 5-year plan decrease. And in my experience, for every time we do a 5-year plan for the consultant for ACD, it's always been done in-house. And so I'm looking at it like that at this point in time. We've really increased ACD's budget and personnel over the last few years. And I'm not sure if they're at full staff or not, but it's basically, y'all seen the plan, and basically it can be dusted off and updated and such as that. It does take some time. They have to go do like community input, but encouraging us to do it in-house instead of a consultant is an option. And with the economic development decrease, I decrease it from the general fund, but I add, if you want to scroll up, no, down, I'm sorry. I decrease it from the general fund and use some of the hotel motel fund balance to increase it back, because you can use hotel motel funds for economic development. And if you just want to keep going.
Mike, what about that? You skipped over a couple of lines there.
Did I?
All right.
Well,
I'm sorry. The manager's branding initiative.
30,
Yeah.
34, 35.
I did. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know. The lobbyist decrease, I just feel like in times like we're in now, I don't know. I don't know that, I'd like to have more discussion about that before we allocate the budget. I think in a lot of ways, we need to do a job in developing the relationships ourselves and seeing how that can work. I do know other communities have a lobbyist that works with them.
So I did a little control F on the document and didn't find lobby or lobbyist. So could you just clarify for me?
It's the managers, the mayors.
It's the government affairs professional services.
Where is it?
Hey, where is?
Yeah, what page, what line item?
Yeah. Where did that come from?
I imagined that was a reframing reflected on that summary line.
They should call them lobbyists anymore, do you? Since they stopped.
And to be clear, 33 should not be decreased, it should be delete, because 100,000 was allocated. It's in the mayor's summary and I personally think as elected officials, we should be able to do intergovernmental.
I'll keep going while you're looking for that, where it's on the page. But community partnership decrease, that's where we're, pre-funding for FY25, and I just assume worry about it in FY25's budget instead of FY24's budget.
And can I pause you there to ask do you know, Manager Williams, why that was, is there any impact on us needing to pre-fund, or, because that jumped out at me too. Why are
Community partnership?
Yeah. because that's, the idea is that that's gonna replace some of the sort of oddly placed independent agency.
That's
Try
right.
and do a process that
Yeah.
replaces that.
Sure, and so the pre-fund, it's got to do with the timing of the process. And so as opposed to doing this all last minute next spring, what we might propose to you that you would do an RFP for all these agencies so you could select the big, your priorities may change from year to year. And we would do that probably in December, and then you would make the awards in the spring, perhaps, sort of like CDBG. And then we can start doing the contracts so that they hit July 1 with money. We wouldn't want to do all that work and then you cut that budget where there's no money there.
So can't we resolve to do that without having to allocate the funding now and then just allocate the funding?
Yeah, but that's your mind right now, but your mind might be different because July 1 this year.
Just mathematically, this is mathematical, does that mean though that if we're going to pre-fund,
Yes.
we're funding right now for this coming year, if we pre-funded for the following year, does that mean we would?
It's the same amount of money.
At the end of this, we won't have to fund it.
It's the same amount of money, yes. You're just moving it slightly forward in time to allow for.
But then the next year, we wouldn't have the independent agencies like we have in here, so
That's
we
right.
just have one of these fees.
We wouldn't have some of them would remain in there, some of them.
Well, they might, let's put it, it wouldn't be this, it would all be under that budget item and not all these separate things. It would
That's
be
right.
that item. So we're-
So this comes on, the other goes off.
Yeah, but the other thing could be if our community partnership priority is youth development and violence decrease, that would all be ARPA money. If that was our push, if we prioritize that as our partnerships, like we would want that kind of thing. So some of the partnerships that could come through are going to be ARPA money. But I also wanted to get back to 33 on the mayor's summary. It says funding $100,000 for governmental, it's very.
Oh, the summary.
Summary. For governmental affairs, professional services to improve communications and support across various governmental agencies. I think we.
So in C92, but
C92,
it says the same exact thing. So.
C92.
All right, but, so are you saying community partnerships topic is what we are currently calling independent agencies that we're going to do a better process of
Yes.
community engagement for what that might look like?
Yes, for some.
Okay.
So remember the way that independent agencies was previously this catch-all term a couple of years ago, that got clarified. And there's really 3 different types of external entities that you fund that was formerly known as independent agencies. And some of those are like the commissions that are created as children of the government, the Greenway Commission, for instance. Others are state partnerships, the library, public health, things of that nature. And then the third one are community agencies that are nonprofits. And that's where it wasn't quite so clear. We've been asked, well, how can I? And so that was just to create a more transparent process and allow y'all to select every year. So that 575 is basically those community agencies taken out of that old process, pre-funded so that you can go through a process and afford it, but knowing the funds are there for the next year.
And can I just, because I couldn't come up with a clear way of imagining the numbers in our different independent agencies that added up to exactly 575. So does that 575 come in at or below the amount currently allocated to all of the agencies that you're imagining get absorbed by this?
I can clarify, my gross understanding is that is what today's dollars are projected for next year.
But it includes a couple of things that.
There's no escalation. We just took those pre-funded this year that would be subject to a future RFP, and we just took those dollars and stuff.
I think it also includes some things that aren't in your currently listed as independent agencies that really are like the homeless shelters.
The homeless shelter, the Athens Tutorial Project, Community Council on Aging,
Vision
Vision,
Young urban builders.
Young Urban
That was
Land trust.
Okay, and here's the whole.
It's been to ARPA money though.
Okay, so could we get like a list that just clarifies
Yep.
for us what
If
is
you look at
that, so that we kind of know?
If you look
What
at
is it?
you look at the F section where it has independent agencies,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
F1. Community agency.
And I guess the whole point of this, y'all, is that it's money that we fund, that we're funding in this year's budget I think we can find next year's budget. Still go through some sort of process to help speed it along, but just fund it in next year's budget like we.
So hearing that, I'm just still trying to wrap my head around this because the community agency's number is way below 575. Now, it doesn't include the homeless shelter, and it doesn't include young urban buildings.
That's 320,000 right there.
Okay, so that would put us at 422, still not 575.
We can give you the.
Yeah. Give us-
Okay, yeah, that's,
There's not,
You don't trust us?
Yeah. Basically, you want to see the list. You want to see the list of what they added up to be the 575.
yeah.
And also.
it's actually 570.
Well, because also, I mean, Commissioner Hamby here has some suggestions that I imagine would actually be part of that. If we're going to increase the funding for Athens-Clarke, for example, the way Commissioner Hamby is proposing, if that is part of that list, then that
Yeah,
goes from
exactly.
525 to
They're
550.
interrelated, exactly.
right.
Same with how when we had those actual entities come speak to us, the ones that were really boards, authorities, and commissions, those are now tucked within the departments.
Yep.
That are,
Like the Greenway Committee, right?
yeah, because that was only a few. So we've clarified that also within the budget. And if, so.
And we can try and do it anyway. I'll just say, if you want contracts to begin on July 1st, you got to start working backwards from putting contracts together to the award that y'all have probably in March. So you could do it at that
Hang
time.
on, we're not doing that currently.
No, it's a change. It's a change.
So I'm just saying, currently with independent agencies, they don't get the contract on July 1st.
When,
So.
We're going to get more.
like that, when do they get the contract?
Get more information depending on which one they are, how that goes, right? That's where that other list is going to come.
I think y'all,
But the philosophy of it.
the point for this budget is 575 being budgeted next year's budget. We can budget it next year. So that's the whole gist of that. The manager's branding initiative, I know Blaine's been after us for this for years, and it's just something I'll brand you for free. And I just don't know if it's a priority for us right now. And it's $75,000 that the mayor put in there. I just think we've got higher priorities that we need to address at this point in our community goals and objectives. So, and then if you just want to scroll up, I'll hush.
You still missed one.
I decreased the community commission
Missed that one.
budget decrease. Take it down to instead of 60,000, it's going to be 40. Well, I did that one wrong too. So it should be decreased by 20,000 instead of 40,000.
Decrease from 20,000 from the.
60,000 to
But
20.
the mayor bumped it up. And then also, I think that for us as a team, we should have that be divided by 10 so that we each have the opportunity to use the travel funds equally.
Right now it's at 30,000, I believe. We take it up.
And the budget has it going up to 60.
So it should have.
This gives it a raise, but not as substantial.
And the budget also breaks down 10 of that for the mayor and 50 for the commission. So are you imagining this proportionally being reduced?
Yes.
Or-
Yes.
Well, divided by 10.
No, I'm saying if you're cutting 20 out, are you cutting 20 out of the commission part of it? Or are you cutting 15 out of the commission part and 5 out of the mayor's part? Or what's the?
I mean, from what it is now. I mean, if we're, so.
The 1/6 of the 20,000 gets pulled out of the mayor's?
Right.
So just clarify, this is a $20,000 reduction from what Kelly suggested, which was a increase, right?
Right.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Okay, now we can go down, however you want to go there. And then the general funds project is similar stuff we talked about, the NTP increase at $300,000 above the $300,000 that's in here. That puts it at about 1.1 million maybe total. It helps us meet the obligations that we've already voted on. but it also helps us to meet some obligations that are going to come up this year, as I'm sure everybody in the district or everybody on the commission has had some requests stay on top of. And it, you know, I would imagine it would be contract work, hopefully that can get done quickly. Council on Aging increase, I've heard Dexter talk about this when CDBG dollars. This I put under capital projects because I assumed it was for a van, but it could go under some other general fund category. Historic designation planning department. I know I've had some requests for some new historic district possible ones. I'm sure Commissioner Wright and Commissioner might need some as well. So this is just to have some money. We budgeted something like this before, so putting it back in there so that it doesn't fall on planning department staff to do these studies, but contracting out to do the studies. Additional roadside mowing through. This is something that Central Services did ask for that wasn't budgeted under it's on one of these pages here. Within the Central Services Department.
B32.
Thank you.
B32, thank you.
B32?
B32.
I have it all memorized.
This is for additional roadside mowing free, and I just, as I represented Timothy, and I know most of the folks who represent outside the city utilize this a bit more. And I've gotten, requests to do this and right now we just make one pass, but on the streets and allowing Central Services to have the tools they need to do this. They do it frequently, but maybe they can look to do it more frequently or even contracting out to get some help to stay on top of it.
So is that just for the equipment? Because
I put $100,000 in there just to.
Okay, because you're not going off the equipment number.
Right. Yeah.
But what about the staffing?
Just to clarify, the capital project was assuming that the operating request would come in FY27, and building up funds
For that.
for the
And I
equipment.
want to make sure everybody's aware of that, Tim,
Well,
because that's not going to turn into a crew next year.
Right.
here's the other thing that could happen there, Josh, is that we could look at contracting out some of this stuff too.
Sure. No, then that could be what you, but we would need to know that that's what you
Okay.
want, because that won't get us a crew.
I think the idea was, it was, I guess one other thing I had, when I talked with Mike, was, if opportunity presented itself, to either contract out, or if our staff can do it, contract in, we can get more moving. I represent a district that's on the outskirts, and Mr. Townsend Road, that grass grows up pretty fast. One of my suggestions, and I was saying, I know based on our needs and what we got from a workforce standpoint, whether we can use some additional funding to do contracting.
Well, maybe a follow-up question for us can be, what can we do if we with 100,000 for contracting out, how much work could we get done?
Yeah.
Little feedback to make sure it's relevant
Yeah.
for that image that we're looking for.
Well, and there's also, I can envision an RFP process for landscaping companies here in town where, okay, we've got $100,000. Tell us what service that would provide for cutting some of these major, maybe we pick the streets that we contract on and let our central services work on some other streets. I mean, there's ways to accommodate.
So would it be more appropriate for, as far as when staff looks at this, instead of it saying mowing crew, to just be additional roadside mowing RFP?
Service or something.
Service, yeah.
Yeah, service.
Yep.
So that we all are, the vision you think of as a crew is as position
Yep.
versus service.
So to clarify that on that one, then that would not be the same thing as D32, which is the equipment for the operation that would happen according to the description, FY27.
Well, that was the question I was asking. I was just asking the clarifying question.
Right. But I mean, we mentioned this page before, but now we're changing it to basically money available for contracting additional mowing.
Or however we can provide it.
So we're not taking care of this request.
So that to be clear, that capital project is future years anyway. It's not FY24.
Right. But I just wanted to make sure it wasn't the same thing.
I go with it.
But some of the,
And then these, is this a one-time? This one?
Well, you could call it a pilot project and see what happens. I mean, yeah, so. Pilot project with landscape businesses, I don't know.
No, I meant the next one down.
Oh, solicitor.
64 that he's got.
64 solicitor VP vest. Yeah, that's a one-time thing.
Bulletproof.
Bulletproof vest. 65 is, alleyway improvements. We just recently voted on some opportunities to improve some alleyways. I think a couple were in your district, Commissioner Blaine. And we know there's one that we talked about in 5 Points.
That we getting some plans underway, a concept, somebody working on how to get that.
Right. So capital dollars. See
Get it going.
where that can take us. Sheriff, capital project request. Dexter, you want to speak to this?
Yeah, one of the things, sheriff, is more present, of course, with salaries, but one of the things is what would be the other priority within the sheriff department, and there are some projects that he thought that could be helpful with them with inside the jail, possibly doing things. I'm not, and again, he didn't specify what he would use those dollars. And we thought we didn't give him anything in the budget at all. I thought it was appropriate. At least $100,000.
He requested 700,000.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
other departments have requested a lot too, so.
I know, I'm just saying, but
I hear you. No, I'm not arguing. I'm just saying, using that as a frame of reference, if we could show other departments that ask for a lot too. Try where you want to put the priorities.
So there's that. And then the last one's just an environmental study follow-up with Pitter, Delmont Road, whatever that follow-up may be. So, all right, I'm done. You want to?
I've got a
I
couple.
think he was going to correct a whole bunch of stuff.
Just wanted to, should we stop sharing it with the public yet?
No,
So they can
it's up to
see y'all deliver.
Yeah,
oh,
Not
they
my,
want to see that. They want to see us.
sure. Yeah. Did you want to correct some of it though?
so we'll get to that. I mean, I think we kind of hashed out a lot of it.
Okay.
So are the numbers right then?
Well, still, it looks like we're short based on this.
about $207,000.
$200,000.
We're rolling it back a mill?
232,000.
252,000. We can find that.
Yeah,
I just don't know exactly.
So is this a good time for us to give everybody some around time and you've been taking notes on maybe what you liked or like as a priority? And I mean, this does to me capture a lot of things that we have talked about as a group and individually in prioritizing. And of course, always got to spend the hotel motel leftover money. Can't leave that. And then, but so let's share where we are, and that'll give Mike time to find the 252. I'm sure you're not comfortable with that red section here, but Patrick, do you want to start, or Carol, you have kind of had your hand up.
Discussing this, but this.
Whatever your priority is, or what you think about this,
Yeah.
or what your list is. This is a starting point.
So, I would like to focus on the healthcare.
Isn't that in?
And then there.
But so we are discussing Mike's budget. We're not.
No, just
Okay, so,
with your healthcare.
I think our top priorities, the 1% additional for employees. Possibly looking at that.
Market increase.
Market increase, yes. From your slide, I think it was 12, B and C. And, healthcare, potentially, increasing the healthcare for this year. For the ACC to make, to cover more of that cost, to lessen the burden for the employees. And solid waste has tipping fees at $55, but surrounding counties and municipalities, there's around $70. So we didn't mill at 60. tipping fees to at least $60.
So on page, look on page B15, the expenses, new initiatives, additional positions, where it says the sheriff's office inmate healthcare contract, that 2 billion, does that not cover what we've already voted on?
I think
And
you
you
were
wanted
talking about
more?
employee healthcare.
Employee healthcare.
Oh, you said inmate, that's what.
You said, I thought you said inmate. Okay, so you want to help?
So instead of every year, employee healthcare increases.
Yes,
So
their cost for their premiums.
increases. And ACC pays a share of that. Can ACC pay a bigger share?
Right.
On those?
And
Yeah,
that's that benchmark
There
progression.
you go.
right. And then that topic, because that's a big priority for me too, is captured somewhere in here, isn't it, on employer increased? Which number is that?
Under expenditures.
Okay, I need to look at you. Top page.
Line 23.
It includes the start of the sizing plus freezing FY23. Yeah. So that employees, we're not giving employees a raise this year and then charging more in health. Rate freezes at FY23.
Employee healthcare benefit freeze levels and work on the benchmark, which also picks up on what we talked about earlier, tackling this for next year in maybe another way. But, and then the tipping fees, that is coming out of committee? Isn't that part of a committee recommendation from solid waste?
It's in the budget for this year.
So you're good with that, how it is in the budget?
Increase it, right?
It increases. And
The budget, has it increased or it keeps it?
the budget had to increase to 55, but when you look at other counties, they're around $70. And what's happening is a lot of the counties, the people from other counties are coming using our trash or our solid waste facilities, our landfill, because it's a lot cheaper. But we taxpayers are bearing the burden of the cost to subsidize. We're not subsidized. We're taking,
Yeah, we're picking up, getting
of
other.
the county. So if we increase our tipping fees, it will lessen other counties or other municipalities that bear their trash here.
What page, does anybody know what page that's on?
Didn't we have a work session and how Susie was, I mean, she was real fast because it was late. I know she covered a lot of material, but she was also talking about how that was going to adversely affect and communities pay for the pickup for the tipping fees. Isn't that coming to us as a bigger thing from staff and through solid waste? What was the number, Jesse?
G27.
Mike,
Yeah, go ahead.
right, just say it a different way. So we try to honor cost centers, right? So the landfill is its own cost center, its own fund. And so those fees will go in there. And just like any other hauler in Athens-Clarke County, so too does the county pay landfill tipping fees for its collection service. And that collection service fee is borne by the users that benefit from that and not taxpayers. So, these are just different cost centers. So when you raise the tipping fee, there's going to be a corresponding increase with folks that are using our service for solid waste collection.
And it's actually G28 is where it's line 61 on G28.
Okay.
And with private haulers as well, one would
Yes,
expect.
that's right.
But for many of us are private haulers.
Yes, they're going to pass the cost on to you.
Yes.
So there's just that byproduct. But on the other hand, the cost of post-closure landfill actions and, that continues to be something that these funds buffer against.
All right, Patrick, what was one of the other priorities? Did you cover that?
Yes, those are my three.
Okay. What was the third one? What was your third one, Patrick?
Oh, just the tipping fees, healthcare benefits and employee, an additional, raise, percent raise.
A percentage from what's in the book.
That's correct.
Okay. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next.
And Melissa?
I would like to see us, get closer to meeting the request for the CEP funds. They asked for 250, Kelly's proposed 120.
What's the
The events,
Oh, CEP.
That's funding, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the hotel motel tax coming in is risen exponentially. Tax revenues much higher. You know, that those funds sat at $60,000 for like 20 years, and we've had multiple extra festivals, and it's gotten a lot more expensive to put them on. And as our downtown has become more homogenized with students, I feel like these festivals are absolutely necessary for our broader community, to show our broader community that this downtown belongs to them too. So I would like to see us get closer to that too.
And, okay, so, but it's been raised, but that also has to go to ADDA.
Yeah.
Because it's all in the CP.
Yeah,
CEP.
it's in the CEP funding.
Yeah, and through AD. And then, Patrick, do you remember what Katie told us last night? Because now Visit Athens, Georgia, they have a grant program for marketing for special events. Remember her saying how much that was gonna be? 80,000. Anyway, it's another bucket for them it's gonna be promoted for them to do that too. And then ADDA has a limit per event request. That's something that's out of our, might be able to speak to that, but that's out of our
Well, they've asked
disbursement.
for a higher per event request limit, and I don't know if that's us or ADDA.
It's ADDA. That's not us.
Has it been discussed in ADDA, Mike?
It has been. I mean, I will say this, the request we get in, as of right now, don't total anywhere near $250,000 a year and for expenditures. But we also like to see, new events come online. We try to prioritize some new events because the older events are able to raise dollars from private sources, sponsorships. I think the 120,000 is a good level. I think it will allow us to increase some of the dollars that are going towards the organizations, and that list does come back to us to approve, as you remember. We do approve those numbers. So I would say let's 120,000 I think is a good number. The other thing is that on ADA organization in the past has had these, meeting some cost obligations. We do step in and provide additional ADA funds. I think some of the things that this body has done to help with the cost associated with downtown events is downtown events used to have to pay for parking when they took up parking spots. Now they don't. For example, it saves Twilight in the thousands of dollars. So I think, I can get you get ADDA to send over.
Yeah, I'd like to see some numbers on that. And also if ADDA has any indication on how attendance has increased at the fees.
The police would probably be able to tell us that.
ACCPD.
Yeah, they would probably have those
And
numbers.
the other thing about this grant for special events from Visit Athens, it's not just downtown. It's for anywhere in the community. So that one's broader there. But I think it's good that the mayor, so should we look for an area where there's maybe we could see how this new disbursement goes out? But
Well,
I know that the cost of throwing these events has gone up.
Yeah. And some of it's security, and we talked about what we could do to use other funds to help. I thought I saw something in here that there was a fund, some dollars to help with overtime pay.
Yeah.
And it could be.
Well, it's essential that they have security presence.
there's some things we can do to help mitigate some of the costs.
Which one of your other topics?
When the judges came and talked to us about this audio visual position that could float among the different courts, basically over the whole courthouse. I'm really interested in that because I feel like, I think we've learned a lot from years watching, hearing. I forget, it wasn't that much.
I'm sorry, I missed that one, so I'm not.
But I feel like it could be really essential to those courts and possibly even save them money.
87,000,
87.
page C137.
And maybe we could go with a half year or a part-time position, how it's working out, but I kind of feel like in this day and age.
She was referencing.
I make any comment on that?
The courts.
What was the position that us planner asked to add
That's the
$1,000.
position.
The coordinator.
Or that treatment coordinator.
Treatment services administrator.
Right, and I talked to him and I said, how do we get somebody that's an AEB specialist
Also coordinate.
that can do all the coordinating too? And he said, that's great.
Kind of
Two skills.
different skill.
Yeah, we'll be.
Like, that's like a broad skill set.
Melissa, do you have another topic that's, these are, I mean,
Yeah.
as far as-
I
Good-
have
good topic.
questions, I guess it's kind of for the manager about the planning consultant for the comp plan. 98,
What was it,
C98.
98?
Where is that? Yeah, and it says the request for this year is 50,000, and then a request for next year is 50,000. And then it goes up to 150,000 in FY26. Can you explain the dispersion of that? And are we gonna be forming an outside consultant to do kind of that facilitating and public outreach stuff?
Yes, and I'd like to defer to the manager.
So we're essentially trying to save up money to hire a big consultant because this will be the 10-year
Yeah.
update.
Yeah.
The 10-year update is probably the most important conference plan update there is. And specifically right now, with the way our land use decisions are, it's going to be really important. So we want to get a really good consultant.
I.e. the Greenbelt revisiting the 20-year land use decisions that have been made that are causing some of the byproduct that we're seeing now with the rising in-town values and that type of thing. We're not questioning that. It's just there are consequences to that 20 years later. So this is probably the time that you're going to want to really dive into that.
Really critical.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I want to make sure that's enough. That's my concern.
Fair.
I want to make sure that we have the money to hire the best possible consultant to really do the outreach and.
Well, and I don't want us to lose track of what was made 20 years ago where we do have a green belt. Is that, I mean, but that's a discussion for another day.
That's right. And we're not questioning that. We're just saying that it's going to be time to kind of vet that if you agree.
But also on, if I'm reading this right, on C98, where this is that we're saving up for FY26. So again, philosophically, we want to focus on this year's budget for this year's stuff and know that we can
Okay, that's
add
my
to
question. I wasn't
and
sure
make
if that's
sure,
what it
by
was.
that time, it could be 250. And we would want to make sure that we are ready for, I think we agree with that. I see the agreement in that.
And not to belabor that, but that would involve some community engagement and things of that nature.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I want to make sure we hire the right.
Do we have something else? I mean, we'll come back around too, but
I think that's it for now. The dates are kind of.
so we covered the AV in the courtroom to see what we get. And that was 85,000.
And I mean, I'd like to see some numbers on AP events.
Okay.
Security costs.
I'm ready.
All right, Carol, good.
Yeah, I'm real committed to doing what we can do for our employees. So in addition to the healthcare costs, adding in that wage floor increase, adding in the 1%, those different suggested raises in there. I think we are in a crisis situation with our employees, the job market changing. We need to preserve our employees and award them. So I would like to use funds to follow through on some of those raises. I guess I would also like to understand better, and this is maybe a follow-up, between what we heard at the beginning of this when Lane addressed the life cycle requirements and these numbers and what Mike is suggesting. And I'm sort of like, there's a lot of numbers thrown away around there. So I want to understand those two things. I'm very much into saving up for the replacement roof. So whether or not those are the vehicles or everything else that we need to take care of, and not continuing to put that off for another day. So the healthcare costs, the employee raises, the wage floor, the life cycle, I have to be convinced not to put what staff is saying that we need to put in there. Because I just hear this year after year, The library positions are really important to me. And I think we're addressing that, but I do want to say that I'm getting my dates mixed up here, but we do have, I know in terms of saving up, we have the planning department, but we're talking about adding more employees. So I hope sometime to see a plan for how we're saving up to help staff that new library on the east side. Because that's going to be a lot of employees. I mean, I know it's our contribution, let's put it that way.
I hear you.
So I'd like to know what the plan is for that while we're doing some other things. The big thing I want to bring up, because I haven't heard anyone say it, and I am more committed to this, is the Black History Museum. After I brought it up last week, I talked to Miss Hattie, and then I also talked to Paul Kramer, because I was not aware of the space that's available and that the Plastic City Authority has already voted on a prime location, a prime opportunity. And then when I was talking to Paul Kramer, he's already have this fundraising work that he's working on with Miss Hattie. And it just seems that we need to follow through on that commitment. And so I didn't see anything in here on that. I know I had mentioned something about a concept plan last time, but he was talking to me that he thought there would be some pro bono work that would be available to help with that. I talked to Miss Hattie again. She has some other contacts. And he really thought that a good chunk of the money needed to be in the budget this year to get that place open. With everything that's going on in the arena. And those of us who were there last night saw what an exciting place that is. So that's my big meaning
Well,
thing.
that's good. You've got some big rocks and some little pebbles and some,
We
is
also,
the museum of pebble or, I mean, what? I don't even know what size.
it's already a pebble. It's already a pebble that we a big pebble that we committed to already. So it's not something new. It's something we voted on back in December.
Well, can I just?
Yeah, just one more thing before I forget it, because you were talking about that planning and saving up. And I was wondering if Assistant Manager Jones, was there going to be any money in that saving up for something like that, the urban plan that, like whether or not that's in-house or out-of-house, that helps us really see where the long-term expenses for maintenance of our county are. So I want to touch that one. I don't want to forget that.
Sure. So the Urban 3 plan is something that we need to outsource because we really don't have that skill set in-house. And my understanding is from Director Griffin, that needs to occur prior to the comprehensive plan update, maybe a couple of years prior to. So no, it does not contemplate that. The saving up does not contemplate that.
Does that have to have that in time? Would it have to be funded now? And is that something he's interested in, or can it wait for next year, or what?
I think it can wait for next year. If you wanted to fund it now, I think Director Griffin would be pleased.
Yes.
But it is a priority for him. Okay, thank you.
And there's 50,000 in the budget already for planning. So to hit that total of 150, do we just need to add 100 or 150?
Separate 150.
So,
Oh, I'm adding each of these years, and that's not the way to go.
But it doesn't have to be, it can be funded next year if need be.
That's
We're
right.
not going to do anything with
but
it.
if we put it next to it, we don't have
100 into it.
We do our future.
Yeah,
No, we
can I
didn't.
save some of it now? And
Because we're not,
If you wanted to fund the
We wanted to plan for the
P3 or is it the
urban 3.
Urban 3, you could put 100,000 in the budget this year because there's already 50 there. And that 150 would be dedicated towards that, understanding that we would have to save up more money in the future for the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
but you're not going to do, they're not going to, whatever group, not necessarily Urban 3, but whatever group does this wouldn't necessarily do it this year. Right? Or
They
would they
could.
do it
Would
when
we
they
have
want to do
economic
it, when they want to make sure it's tied in with the comp plan
or-
and.
The future
Otherwise, we get a future land use map
So
that
that's-
doesn't have it. Yeah. Our future growth concept map and our future land use map that are going to inform our comprehensive plan are going to have sweeping implications. And if we don't do this analysis before we do
It's like the
those,
future group.
then whatever we try to stuff into the comp plan later is going to either require we change those maps all over again, or regret that we didn't do this ahead of time. I really.
I'm not arguing. I'm not even arguing. I'm just saying, I don't disagree with doing it ahead of time, but do we do it ahead of time now, or do we do it ahead of time at next year's budget?
I would propose that we add some money to this year's budget and with the idea of adding to next year's to pay it off so it can
Well, if that's under that.
be undertaken in FY24.
This, it sounds like this topic could be included in that same, still on that page C98. Where you were.
Yeah, that's what I thought I was.
We want to make sure whatever we're studying.
We had all the adequate funding to do the planning.
But it would still be within the comprehensive plan 5-10-year updates. And planning, I mean, it sounds like that's the same, yeah, that's the same.
It sounds like depending how much we get out of it, if we did this year in advance of the future land use map update, it sounds like we may need to consider a year or two from now, an additional study to integrate that with the comprehensive plan. Is that what I'm hearing? So the but the 150, if we put in this year's budget, would be fully expended, send out an RFP, whoever responds, urban 3 or otherwise, does that economic analysis. That informs our future land use map and our growth concept map. Then when it comes time to integrate all of that into our comprehensive plan update, if our newly established specialist for the comprehensive planning needs that additional support, we can get an additional future budget request for outside consultancy at that time.
Right, and it's 50.
But if we don't put in an additional 100 now to tack on to that 50, we don't have the money to do anything this year, which means we don't have any kind of analysis done in advance of a new future.
Yeah.
We
That's
can
what I
do
was
an
trying to get
amendment
at.
to the budget.
Yeah.
Once we get it.
Exactly.
Versus adding it now, because we don't know what the.
Well, if we add it now, they can send out the RFP.
But even if we,
The summer.
we can send out the RFP now still and do an amendment to the budget to add. I mean, a lot of times we're doing amendments to the budget.
I'd rather see it be a line item in the budget.
Yeah, okay, so we're wrapping up Carol's list.
Oh, and
It
Mike,
sounds like this one's piggybacking on yours, so I like where we're getting the
That's what I was
overlap.
talking about.
I like where we're getting the overlap there. And then,
Mike wanted to say something in response.
Just to wrap this discussion up, and I think this, what you're saying, yes, that it also it might fit in within one of the ARPA categories as well. So just point that out. With regards to Black History Center, I think there are other sources of monies that we get. There are other sources of dollars that I think we can look towards. So certainly that area is part of the TAD program as well. So,
Yeah.
and I know we'll be discussing that TAD.
Wait, I just, the TAD?
TAD.
Okay, right. So the TAD, yeah, I was looking at that because the TAD, those TADs don't have that much funding.
Well, they don't, but I mean, if we're looking.
I mean, they will.
Future line and build out and stuff like that, that's what I'm focusing on. Because I think we'll be able to cover a concept.
Okay.
There's partners that I think can help with that.
and just some little information about one of your topics, the Black History Museum, I'm hearing 1.25 million is the size of that entity.
Yes.
So for those right notes.
Oh, yeah.
Sarah dug that up. That's not something we're looking to find at this point, but we also want to make sure we're building. There could be grant writing. We want to make sure there's matching funds or whatever. There's more to that. And I wanted to make sure we're done.
I just wanted to make sure Mike had said everything in
Well,
response
he's
to TAD.
talked a lot, so we're trying to give everybody else their turn. And we'll come back around.
Thank you. No, I'm joking.
You don't like it when I got my red hat on, do you? Okay, so Tiffany has yet to talk, and I wondered if you were waiting, Tiffany, or I didn't want to just keep the rest of us talking so much. You want us to come back around to you?
Well, all of my big rocks are traffic calming and streetlights. So
Okay, and we're covered, and then are you okay?
also the Black History Museum.
Yeah.
I just need to wait.
Yeah, so we need to just make sure we're have the funds for the opportunity to help as that's moving forward. And that's the dollar amount I just learned, that we have just learned. Okay, so who is
I'll go.
next?
And just to echo Carol and Tiffany, because, you know, if we look on our,
Museum?
well, we look on
ARPA report.
ARPA rescue plan is 1.25 1.25 is in there now, and money might have already been expended.
It says balance
It's got a
after
balance.
commitment, so it's still available.
It's still available, so it is under the, affordable housing. So again,
So if I could be clear about that, so if I'm remembering, so the AJMP, the Athens Justice and Memory, they determined that there was 5 million that needed to be returned to the community. And I know I talked with Ms. Hattie, she said, well, university, city were involved, so 2.5 to the university, 2.5. And then of that 2.5, there was a recommendation to y'all for 1.25 for an RFP for housing. And that came in the wake of the attorney weighing in on the gratuities clause and being able to give money to specific people. And so AJMP felt like, well, we'll create a new housing program. And so they also at the same time brought a recommendation for 1.25 million for the Black History Cultural Museum. So you accepted both of those, you took those into consideration, and you turned around and allocated the 1.25 for housing. And so that's going to inform the RFP that staff's working on. So that 1.25 is committed for the housing.
Out of ARPA.
Out of ARPA.
so
ARPA contingency, not affordable housing. Affordable housing got spent all the way out. So pull that out of the contingency and stick it in towards affordable housing.
The memory and justice
The
affordable.
1.25 million.
Right, yeah, that's.
so I guess my question is, so we have to find another 1.25 or the.
If I remember that correctly, I think after what I just told you and without any allocation for the Black History, I think we've got a $600,000 balance under contingency. I don't know why that's sticking.
In ARPA.
In ARPA.
ARPA.
See, I know that vote was taken in, I think in December before we came, I believe.
And remember, and so I know this is confusing. I know I've talked with Ms. Hattie about it. So when a master plan comes to you, when, recommendations from a committee, the verb that you use sometimes to say, we hear you, we're going to take that under advisement. Take it under advisement, then you use the word accept. So you accepted the recommendations without any further, but then you took the extra step of allocating for the housing, but not yet for the Black History Cultural Museum. And there was some question there about how the ARPA funds could be used, that it had to be related to the pandemic, but we do think we can find a way to do that. But once you do that, if you look at the very bottom right-hand corner, it's $605,000. So said another way, there was 1.8 million in contingency, because if you'll remember, took, I think, 1.2 and put it towards Bethel, right? So that came out of the contingency first, left you with 1.8. Now you've added 1.25 for the AJMPs for housing, which leaves you with 600,000. So unless you reallocate it from one of the other line items, if you want to put 1.25 towards the Black History Cultural Museum, you're only going to get 600 out of the contingency.
So you could get the other 625 out of something else if you wanted to. Okay.
The funds
But you said ARPA, okay.
And then understanding the timeline to, again, it might not all be this budget. It also is a team effort,
Yeah.
I think, in the community. Back to Tiffany.
Yeah, back to me. I also wanted to, for the overtime for the probation officers. And they were asking for how much? 20. Thank you, cousin.
20,000 for probation officer overtime. That was brought up last week. Okay. Dexter, you're still going on your priorities?
Yes, ma'am. And again, we put in, glad to see, put in the 20,000 for accessory. I think that's important. Then also for council agent, who supports older members of our community. I think those two things was important to me. And again, I in the echo Commissioner Danforth, I do want to see our employees looking at the pay raise was in there. So one thing when I talked with Commissioner Hamby, we was talking about trying to cut things, want to make sure that the pay raises would stay in there. With the recommendation for the pay raise would stay in there. So I think we did. I think the way it looked at pay raises stayed in there.
It didn't touch them.
Yeah, we didn't touch pay raises. So want to make sure, and also with the healthcare freeze, if we could get them a pay raise and the healthcare doesn't go up, that'd be more money in their pocket. So I think your people is your most valuable resource, and we gotta take care of our staff, so.
Okay, all right. I'm hearing a lot of good repeats for the healthcare and the staff and the raises that are already in here. Jesse, you ready to go
So
with your priorities?
I'm gonna set a timer. So that, I'll shut up if I'm not done in 5 minutes, but I'm gonna shoot for 3. Yeah. Yeah, so spreadsheets are also my favorite. Worked a lot on spreadsheets for the 2 budgets we passed the last couple of years, ARPA, T-SPLOST, I love it. So I'm
Rolling his sleeves up. Let's
working in this one right now, and Commissioner Hamby and Commissioner Fisher brought us something that I think has a lot of great stuff in it. So I'm using staff's spreadsheet, but with a bunch of stuff done to it. So the full 650,000 for health insurance premiums and the 415,000 for right sizing ACC Gov employee share. Now, I do want, this is a request of staff, for both that health insurance and the wage thing I'm going to get to in a second. I would like some clarification on what, if any, funds are available in some of these all funds, some of the other funds that could help make up some of the gap, because that 650 does not get all the way up to the 875. However, 500,000 for that range for the employee health clinic. I think another way we can help reduce costs is getting that off the ground. I put in the spreadsheet I'm currently looking at. So the spreadsheet I'm currently looking at is balanced. 615,000 for the market increase and the pay table increase across all funds. And so that's, assuming that's an additional 1%.
Which is.
In my personal view, that would be doubling the performance pay budget from 1% to 2% to help reward some of those employees who haven't gotten as much of that, while retaining the 4% that's already built into the budget. It has the 60,000 to get that wage floor up. I feel very passionately about that for sure. I put 30,000 for ACCA, so that matches their CDBG request. It's just fully matching their CDBG. I think y'all had 20,000 in yours. I put it at 30. 20,000 for Athens Tutorial, 51,003 for the Superior Court Treatment Services Administrator. That's a half year salary like y'all are talking about, but it also includes the capital costs and operating expenses that the full, it's 87,000 for the salary cut in half, and then plus those expenses, it's 51,000. 100,000 for the planning department, which combined with the 50 would put us at 150 total to get that study done before the future land use. I have 156,715 for the library, all of their salaries except for the security. So that's fully funding their current employees getting all the raises they've requested, which puts them parallel to what we're doing for our own staff. Same thing for the public defenders. The DUI drug court transfer, that's 67,000. It's on page C133. I feel very passionately that is important for us to do to help low-income people succeed in that program. I think the judge made a very strong case for that. I have $500,000 of the 1.25 for the Center for Racial Justice and Black Futures. That gets us close to halfway there, recognizing maybe we can use TAD funds or SPLOST funds or more general fund monies next year. 87,000 for the judicial AV administrator, and we move on down to some of the capital stuff. 800,000 for live stream pipe replacement, which is still under the 1 million they really think we should do as kind of a bare minimum, but 800,000 more than we're currently doing. The 92.5 for neighborhood traffic management plan, so just the amount that gets us fully funding what's currently been approved. 480,000 for the IT, the 95,000 for the health clinic capital expense. I really liked Commissioner Hamby's move on the hotel motel, so I stuck with that for the economic development department transfer, but used the 50,000 for the community events program. So that would bring that up from 120 to 170, which is kind of halfway between what's currently proposed and what they're all asking us for. Kept the workforce development correction and the other things that staff recommended. So how do we pay for all this? There's the 1 million in decreasing operation contingency, the hotel motel transfer, and then there's 3 ARPA transfers I'm suggesting. So the vaccine incentives, if you look at that spreadsheet we got in our last work session, the nonprofit capacity building, the vaccine incentives, and the contingency/future needs lines. Those all add up to a little over $1 million. So they're listed as vaccine incentives, contingency/future needs, and nonprofit capacity building. And then the correction to the community energy fund, assuming we pass that, which it sounds like it will, and I removed the assault rifles. And then I agree with Commissioner Davenport on the $60 a ton tip fee to bring us up to the average, and I would request that staff let us know how much revenue they anticipate that additional $5 would generate. That all comes with reducing our millage rate an additional 0.1 mils to an even 13. I think Commissioner Myers made some really great points about how the average homeowner in this community is already paying less than they were last year in property taxes.
That's one example, one example.
Sure. So,
The rest of us are.
school boards making up a lot of that, but anyway, that doesn't mean you're paying less overall. The school board is hitting you hard. But our homestead exemption has gone up from 10,000 to 25,000, gone up 250%. And that only applied to the county side. So anyway, still further cutting the millage rate by a tenth of a mil to an even 13. And that leaves us with $32,000 to throw at whatever someone thinks $32,000 should go at.
That's a 1/10 of a mil reduction?
Yeah. So back down to an even 13. And that ensures that the same way everyone in our community is struggling to balance their pocketbooks, so do all of the employees that we are struggling to recruit and retain. Are they able to live here as well? Unfortunately, currently that budget, which is in the red, doesn't have anything for their wages going up, even though it does cover the healthcare costs. This adds the wages and it adds the community clinic.
I didn't think it took out what's in there.
No, it adds a stronger
Still in
wage
there.
increase.
Yeah, this adds okay, sorry.
Still in there. Yeah, this is still in
For
there.
the sake of clarity,
This was just an hour.
4% remains in there and all these.
Yeah.
This is plus the 1% performance pay. I'm proposing that we add an additional 1% performance pay to help us retain the talent we've got that we keep losing. I'm also fine with it just being a straight up flat, bring the 4 to 5 market increase, whatever people feel passionate about. That I'm not attached to that detail, but I am attached to adding more to the wages of our staff.
Well, I haven't heard your timer go off.
It did go up, but yeah.
How much transfer from ARPA? $1 million?
It totals, sorry, I did it as 3 separate line items, so let me.
Do you email that out?
Yeah, just email that out so I'll see.
Gladly email this out.
I don't see it. I was looking for
It just did that.
It's $1,076,562.
And what email it out. I want to know what
Yeah.
program.
What's that?
I want to know what program the money's coming.
So that's coming from all things that are currently, so there's the vaccine incentive program that we've already abandoned, that we've already said we need to reallocate. It's just, all of these would be transferred into our general fund as revenue replacement, and then that would free up money in the general fund.
And the ones that you.
And then there's a line item on the most recent ARPA spreadsheet that we got that just says contingency/future needs.
605?
That's 605, so that's pulled out. And then the 250 for.
Get an email.
Yeah, because we didn't say we might use that 605 though.
For the museum.
Museum.
Yeah.
Well, this has the 500,000. This has 500,000 for the museum in this proposal.
It's already.
We all need to look at it first.
Yeah. It's a lot. You went through it.
Well,
For the.
no, we're all concerned about time.
And because that was such a large amount of things and not being displayed,
I will email.
you wanted to mention something in reference to some of that, and then, John, I think you're up next.
Yep. And we're here to listen and there's just a couple of points of information. So there's a lot of different revenue sources, expenditures being discussed. I just want to remind you that using one-time capital or say one-time ARPA to either give salary increases or create new programs, it's just that much more money you're going to have to come up with next year because the ARPA won't be there. So there's that. And
Can I just clarify that the amount I'm suggesting we pull from ARPA is still less than the amount for just live stream pipe replacement and the Center for Black Futures.
Sure.
So
And that wasn't-
those are one time.
It's just
Yeah, that wasn't a Jesse record answer. It's just be careful because think about the obligations for next year. So we like to think in terms of that. And the other thing is, we're not here to like counterpoint or anything like that. But if you take that nonprofit capacity building out for the third time, the commission has intentionally removed that out. We've got a new HCD director and has been working with Assistant Manager Jones on that. I'm not lobbying for that because there's all sorts of priorities. But after that, and I mean, what we're going through now, you know,
Well, this retains the 575 for community,
the nonprofit capacity.
Talking about the
no, I understand that, but I'm saying if we're trying to say that we're moving away from this weird haphazard independent agency situation to a structured community partnership program, in my mind, that's maybe a place to start looking at. We could grow that next year if we need to, but we start with the 575 that's proposed.
You could, but
So this retains that in the budget.
There's still going to be a need for nonprofit capacity building because we're trying to get funding if the groups that
if the commission
don't have the experience.
Yes,
If the
right.
commission wants us to engage with folks that don't have the experience and look no further than the last 12 months and what that looks like, we're going to need to do that or partner with somebody else, the Athens Area Community Foundation. But there's a need in this community for training for our nonprofits.
Okay.
The chamber be approached for.
Yeah, let's hold on to that. Yeah, let's hold on to that. And, because we're down to John as far as us going through everybody's priorities and points. And go ahead.
So, a couple of things. So on D70, Leisure Services Master Plan, we funded for it last year. Have they done it yet? I don't understand why we're doing it, funding for it again.
And Josh, so go ahead.
I think it's split between, they split between 2 years. Thank you. Yeah.
It's a big number and I guess consistent with sort of what Commissioner Hamby was saying, instead of just having all the money in 1 year, knowing it was going to transcend two, you have the money available when the invoices are due. So we split it between 2 years.
All right, so we've got, what my point is, we've got a lot of SPOS projects. I'm trying to figure out where, like the live stream and some of these other things can fall in under these SPOS projects instead of adding them to the budget. So we can reduce the millage rate more, because SPOS projects are technically supposed to be mandatory capital projects. And so, big picture, I'd like to look at reprioritizing the SPOS after budget time, but figuring out where some of this money can come from these SPOS projects. Because I've got all the list of all the stuff, and we've got the money that has been allocated, or the money that's available already just for the public safety vehicle replacement. There's $4.2 million in there right now. And we're adding money into this for that. And then also to the transit, and I don't know what page the transit is on.
7 million?
What?
Talking about the SPOS?
No, the transit budget. What page are they on?
Okay, let's look.
Department or?
The department.
Yeah.
The department is CD 144.
Thank you.
That's key.
Win bingo.
Tim just took a hit on battle there.
Yep. Coming for you.
I was going to remark on the fund, so.
All right, so I'm looking at the enterprise funds in the back.
Look at the fund. Okay, what's the fund?
E32.
Bingo.
All right, so is it showing that the transit is operating at a negative $3.5 million? Is that correct?
Free.
We're on D32.
E32.
Elephant.
32.
Sorry, Al. You might want David to help with this too, because it has to do with depreciation, but it's.
So,
Yes, elephant.
Yes.
Yeah, under the other general administration, David,
Yeah.
that's a big driver though, Brian.
Talk about the transit fund.
Yeah, E32.
E32.
The question is, did we run it? Yes, and to Josh's point, it's, you fund depreciation, it's an accounting treatment, and I don't think I can explain that well, David, in a way that you can as an accountant.
Well, here's the issue with the transit fund. The transit fund is shown as an enterprise fund primarily because it used to charge a fee for services. It no longer charges a fee. So my proposal has been for the past year or so that we need to just move this over to a special revenue fund if we're not going to charge a fee for it. I mean, if all the money's going to come from other government sources, just move it to a special revenue fund, and then that depreciation would not show up in there.
So that's the depreciation of 3.5 million.
It's actually, the depreciation is 4.4 million. If you look a little down below the blue line.
It says requested 4 million. It says net operating income / loss, capital. Under FY24 requested -4 million, 409.
Right.
Mayor recommended 3.5.
Right. If you look a little below that,
Net it back out.
getting balances and stuff, and when you add depreciation back to it because
It's an accounting treatment.
Okay.
And so for dollars purposes, if you look below the blue line, that trues it back up, basically.
So how much are we spending on for the fairs then? That we're not, or are we losing? How much are we having to pay from other departments to cover that?
Well, the last few years have been somewhat of an anomaly because there's been a federal infusion of funds, whether it's CARES Act or Transit for ARPA. But that meal ticket's going to run out.
Back to the ARPA.
And I know Assistant Manager Edwards spent a lot of time with Transit Finance. So how would you like to carry?
Yeah, so this year we got the 70 million in ARPA funds. And so this is the last year we expect to have that type of funding. But when you think about it, this is why y'all created the T-SPLOST project to help fund transit operations. So moving forward, to David's point, there's not a fee coming in to help support this. So back in the day, it was about 2 million in fees from ridership. It was 2 million from the federal government, and it was 2 million in a general fund transfer from ACC Gov, general fund, right? And so those were the three sources. And so we've got to replace that $6 to $7 million. And how do we do that? Well, half is going to come from the federal government and half is going to come from T-SPLOST. Now, there's still a big question about what we're going to do with UGA. That's still out there. But that's the current model moving forward. And so to David's point, maybe we don't have an enterprise fund anymore if y'all are deciding never to charge fees again, right? That's a question for y'all. We've talked about it here and there in different retreats this year.
And it doesn't really save any money. It's just a different accounting treatment.
Right. So if we were a special revenue fund instead of an enterprise fund, we wouldn't have to account for depreciation, which would make this charge simpler. That's it. But what we're saying is it's not as big of a negative. It's actually a positive million, I think, instead of a negative 3.5 if you do the math. But we could talk more about that later too. It's just when you do fund accounting, you have to show it a certain way.
So by going by that, if you look at the revenues was and it's recommended 9.6 million, is that correct?
Yes.
And our expenses are 12.3.
Yes, with depreciation factored in, and you back it back out on the backside. So you can see it's not directly below the request FY24 requested, but move over to mayor recommended. And you can see right there that below the blue line, the depreciation's back out. That gives you an unrestricted net position of 613,000. And then we want to keep an operating reserve, so that shows the deficit. And part of that's driven by the fact that 7.7 million that we received was way late in the year, and we burned through all of our unrestricted net position to run the service until we got the federal money, and the federal money can't reimburse for what you've already done. So part of it in the mayor's recommended budget is to try to recharge that net position.
How much? So was the SPLOST 23, or was it what year SPLOST was it?
At T-Splosh 23, so.
23, so we don't have any funding from that yet.
We do.
Yes.
And is that, so that's, my point is, we're not operating in a negative, we're using the T-Splosh money, right?
That's my understanding, yes. And it's, I know, I'm not trying to be, it's a really complicated thing. But yes, the T-Splosh funds will supplement this coming year. And depending on what we get from the federal government, now, they say we get something and then something less through GDOT.
Yeah.
So that's a projection on what we think we're going to get, right, Josh?
Yes, and to the manager's point, we burned through all of our fund balance last year because GDOT didn't deliver on the funds we thought they were. We have no backup if they do that again next year. That's 500,000 is a small amount compared to the 3.5 that we burned through last year. So we're trying to save back up in case this happens.
All right, and then looking at D169. So this is the pavement maintenance, and I know we've got a SPOS project on that, and we get government money, the old LARC money, right?
That's right.
So why is it the big increase from 1 million to 2.4 in our regular budget if we're getting those other funding sources?
Well, my understanding is that trying to get closer to what is life cycle for our road system. So you're right, we get some funds from T-Splosh. And this is the way it's always been, y'all, since the 10 years I've been here. There's money that comes in from SPLOST or T-Splosh. There's money that comes in from, it's called LMIG, the Local Maintenance Improvement Grant, which is the old LARC, the new LARC. And then we usually have a general fund contribution. In years past, when times were tough, it was usually around $600,000. And so even as y'all approved the T-Splosh pavement, day one, we were already in a deficit mode because we're not funding the life cycle requirement for the paving. And so what we're trying to do is move this budget more towards a life cycle approach so that we smooth out these peaks and valleys in the budget capital requirements. That makes it very unpredictable when your revenue sources are variable. So that's why.
But if you look at FY22, it was 271 million. 23 is 1 million and 24 is 2.4. That's not smooth. I mean, that's a pretty massive increase when we've got these other funding sources also.
We underfunded those, you can go by the recommendations and recycle it, but the life cycle in those past years.
You've been chronically underfunding so many different pieces of infrastructure for so many years.
But that's why I think we need to relook at the T-Splosh stuff, because if we're underfunding stuff, it's just like what Stephen Bailey said when we had that retreat about the stormwater. He asked for $13 million and T-Splosh gave him 500,000. And then the next time he asked for, I don't remember what it was, but he got 3.5. So those are severely underfunded. And so I feel like we've got to change our priorities where we've got what's under the ground is just as important as what's above the ground. And we're about to have some serious problems with the water and sewer. We've got $20 million in there. If we had been doing this and planning for this with these projects, we wouldn't have all this extra stuff and our budget wouldn't be increasing so much each year.
Well, the water and sewer fund, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's a pretty good model of how you fund life cycle. And so over time, you don't suspend any rate increases for 10 years and all of a sudden lurch up. It's just an incremental every year because the cost of business is going up. And if you're talking about the next T-Splosh program, I think that's a great conversation to go ahead and be considering because invariably, and not just here, but also my old jurisdiction, when you say things like that, people say, well, that's not special. And it says special in the SPLOSH.
They might not understand what special means.
No, but I'm just saying, if you'll hear this, that, this is for the amenities, y'all should look to the tax digest to help pay for the everyday stuff. And that's where in the last few years, the commission, while underfunded, did create some new line items in SPLOSH to do with public safety vehicles, fire equipment, facility lifecycle maintenance. So we're starting to get the idea of how to do this and create some line items, but just like everything else, we'll learn.
So SPLOST was originally mandatory capital projects when it was originally passed. Way back when, that's what it started as, mandatory capital projects. And so some of this stuff that we've got in T-SPLOST and some of the stuff in the other SPLOST are not mandatory capital projects. That's my point. We've got things that we're spending money on, but we're not, like y'all just said, we haven't been putting money on these other things, and we're having to pay for that stuff right now. That's why I feel like we need to reevaluate these projects. I mean, the projects are on there, but we need to reevaluate the tiering maybe, or the pricing of how it goes, because some of these projects were severely underfunded, yet us new commissioners are catching the blunt of what happened before. We didn't have anything to do with, Stephen Bailey asking for $13 million to get $500,000. So, I mean, the question is, how do we correct that? Or do we just keep kicking it down the road and saying, well, that was voted on before I got here?
It's only harder to correct it if we keep cutting that millage rate.
Well,
but that's the point, though. The millage rate
Don't have anything to do with SPLOST money.
But that is, I think, an important thing to bring up. And commissioners and commissions have made certain things priority and said, hey, you're going to put 20 million towards stormwater. I'm just making numbers up. And one could do that and say that beforehand. For example, the jail in SPLOST, this is a thing that's all before us, was on 2005, didn't get on the SPLOST. When 2011 came, before it went to the commission said, you are putting that on, so we're taking that off. So the commission can do it. The problem now is that the next SPLOST is not, that's not gonna be going till 2030. And so you're gonna have to, we all have to commit to being around. The next T-SPLOST would be discussing, setting those priorities. So I agree with you on much of that. Yeah.
I'm just saying, we're trying to, stick to the mandatory services and what we need to provide for the county and for our citizens and for our employees, and giving them these raises in the healthcare is extremely important. When we've got openings that we can't fill, we can't provide the services, the level of service that we've committed to our citizens. And so I applaud the health insurance and the pay table increase. I think that's great. But I feel like there needs to be, and this is a bigger thing, but I'm trying to figure out where some of these things can come from SPLOST money that's there, that we've already collected.
So I'd like to answer that. So, and I understand your bigger point for future SPLOST. So I'm just going to talk about the existing T-SPLOST and SPLOST. So unfortunately, especially for 2020, escalation has gone through the roof, as we know. Case in point, one of the biggest SPLOST 2020 projects was affordable housing. And we just went through mostly all of it from the Bethel private. So escalation has really compromised all these lists of projects in the existing SPLOST. Now, when you put a SPLOST together, what seems to be a good practice is having some very specific projects there, like we're going to build a sidewalk here or do this at this park or whatever. And then you have some buckets, right? So sidewalk improvements or pedestrian improvements and things like that. So with the SPLOST or T-SPLOST, you're obligated to the citizens to build those things as described, or you can go back to them and ask them to take it off, there's a process for that. So I would say to you that there's several ways that you could maybe get some additional funds and move them around. One, the easiest is surplus taxes. So we're collecting, but some of these are not so much a time and you get whatever you want. It's an amount certain. So sometimes excess taxes work that way, sometimes they don't. And then you could say, well, we'll just take away from some of these general buckets where it's not quite as clear what we've got to build, and we can move them elsewhere. But for the specific buckets, you pretty much need to leave those intact or add to them.
So that, I do agree that there's a time, we talked about it at other times tonight, for us to look at tiering, understanding the designated amounts and the designated projects, but the timing could maybe help us.
I mean, we can't do that before we vote on this, but, all right, so how about, I'm asking a question on D130. the utility billing system, we had $100,000 in 22, $300,000 in fiscal year 23, and we're recommending $1 million. So it's a $700,000 increase. What's the reason for the increase?
Sorry, what page was that?
E130?
Kids and don't. Sounds like the billing system, current billing system is in need of repair. Is that the bulk of that?
Yes. And
Okay.
so that what we have, y'all, for our billing system is running off of, oh gosh, it's such a legacy computer,
AS400.
AS400.
Oh, yeah.
And it's literally a green screen. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but we need to do a better job. I can answer the question and parse it out why they divided it up like this, but they're, imminently about to change the systems over, which is something we're doing in a lot of different areas of the government that's invisible to the folks generally.
So is that come out of the water enterprise fund or out of the general budget?
No general fund dollar. Now, and just while we're at that point for everybody, so for our enterprise funds, by and large, now exception would be transit, but we don't use water sewer revenues to subsidize the budget, except that all special or enterprise funds are charged a 3% administration fee because their operations, while different cost centers use HR, finance, so on and so forth, IT. And so that is an accepted practice in local government to charge an administration fee from enterprise funds. Well, and y'all might call it something different, but.
Let me ask you this, if you don't mind, John, on that point, when's the last time we have increased that percentage?
Well, what we actually do is every couple of years, we hire an outside firm that specializes in cost allocations for governments. There's funds such as transit and others that utilize a lot of federal monies. There's certain costs that are allowable, certain costs that aren't allowable to be included in pooled costs. And so we just went through that this year. And so it's included in this budget 24. Any changes that you see in funds coming from other funds to the general fund, that was updated for 24.
Excellent.
So the water and sewer construction fund, is that from sewer taps?
That water and sewer, so the revenues come from taps, from the rates that you pay.
Right.
It all goes into the water sewer fund, and then every 5 years, the commissioner approves a service delivery plan that has a projected, rate increases. And all of that goes in, Commissioner, not just for the fixed costs that we have, but also we've done a good job in the past before escalation hit of really being able to fund our construction without additional debt borrowing. But with the escalation of late, that cuts off our horizon. So right now, there's a lot of projects, big projects that are being cash flowed by the funds, seemingly that we carry a lot of fund balance, but we're using it to offset the cost of debt to build these things. And right now, you're going to see a lot of capital deliveries.
So that stuff this is all coming out of the water sewer construction fund, and that's not coming out of the general budget, right?
That's right. Yes, sir. There's no general fund dollars going to water and sewer.
I think, I've got a couple, I think, Rick.
Take your time.
Yeah.
We talked about the leisure service master plan, correct? And then, well, this has to do with cost also, but on D65, this is, parks, R&M existing facilities.
Repair and maintenance.
Yeah. So doesn't that fall under one of the SPLOST projects also? Because we had 67,000 in fiscal year 22, 2.1 then we've gone to 2, but we've got, SPOS 2020 has a parks facility improvement. This got, we've spent, 123,000. We've got 5.2 left. So I'm curious why we've got this SPOS project, there's money in it, why is that not going to this?
Okay, the first column there, FY22 ending balance, that means that's all that's left in the account from previous 2 million or whatever. So that's not how much was given, that's the remainder.
So that went to the fund balance.
Well, there is no fund balance. So what happens is that you grant so much money, they spend it down during the year, and then there's a certain amount left that we can carry forward or that we recognize is there. And so the 67,000 is all that remains of any previous expenditures.
So where's that 67?
Well,
Where's it going to?
well, I think you mentioned something about the leisure service projects that are in the SPOS 2020. That's a whole separate category. That's not included in here at all.
So
SPOS is separate money altogether. So
But there's a SPOS project called Facilities Parks Improvement.
it's improvements, but not maintenance. And so the difference is generally you can't use SPOS for, so
Well, it says SPOS, if you look in the project description, it says SPOS 2020, Project 20 funding. This project provides for repairs, maintenance, and/or replacement of existing programs.
as a supplement.
So, like for instance, the Bishop Park pool, that's coming up. That is, you could call that maintenance or replacing the pool because it's, so old. Memorial Park is another one that would come out of that SPOS fund dealing
These are
with.
separate projects on the SPOS thing. There's a Bishop Park project, there's a Memorial Park, they're separate things.
Well,
We can give you a listing of everything that's included in the 2 million.
Yeah. Yeah, so put that on the list of some,
Sorry.
understanding and knowing that they're separate, but now that you understand that they're separate in those 3 projects, it does lead to believe then this is for what, especially if there's,
these are all, they're defined needs that this money totals up to. It's not a swipe at it. And we can give that detail.
I know, but I understand that, but I feel like that project number 20 that's what that is describing.
That money is only that, the next SPOS y'all won't happen for 7 more years. So you can spend all the money now, but in the out years, you're not going to have any. And so that money was kind of parsed over time. And then in addition to that, if you gave us just the allocation for this year, saving some for the future, we're saying we need this in order to try and keep our parks up. Because we hear complaints from folks about how shabby our parks look, or these tennis courts need to be resurfaced, bathroom, ball fields. We go on to Winder and they have nice ball fields. Why don't y'all have nice ball fields? And so,
And one of the things related to how we handle leisure in their capital budget, Commissioner, if you look at all the other capital projects that they asked for, they were zeroed out.
Yeah, I saw that.
And so what we were able to do is find 2 million for all of the things. And so a lot of those things will probably be these projects that you see that were zeroed out, but they still won't have nearly enough for what they need to keep our current parks in the shape we need.
I think I'm having a flashback. And you said that project 20 that's captured facility parks improvements? What's the total amount on that? Is that a little handout?
The total amount budgeted was 6.5 million. We've designated 1 million, and we've.
Okay, so I think what I'm remembering is, didn't we have so many leisure services requests that we ended up with this bucket so that if something failed of the list of the 6.5, then we didn't move forward? Patrick, am I remembering?
That's why.
Is that what you were about to say? Yeah, go ahead.
So, when we did, our T-SPOS 2020, we put certain categories in buckets. So we say we're gonna allocate $5 million here, $10 million here, strictly for leisure service, strictly for transit or whatever. So this is one of those projects where out of that $5 million that we may have designated to leisure services, we're taking $472.5 for leverage. But there are other projects that leisure services department, as they come online, that, okay, we need to take more money from that $5 million bucket.
Yeah, and so we, instead of listing what we couldn't fund, we left that small bucket for an emergency or, I can't remember what the details were, but I think that's how we left it. But Bishop Park Pool Memorial Park as a separate entity was because of how that committee scored it, and it came out, I think, of the scoring. And then that left us for emergencies that we couldn't predict, and we didn't want to list in case something broke down. Right?
And it's the scoring, but it's also, as I said before, a mix of specific and what appeals to the taxpayers. Do they see that, hey, things are being spread around, or this is an important asset? And so that goes into the decision that the commission ultimately makes too.
Okay.
But the number 20 is just another one of those life cycle new entries into the SPOS realm to kind of buy down the cost of maintaining these facilities over time. When I say maintain, like repair, I can't remember if Sandy Creek, the replacement of the playground there was a call out, or if that's in 20. But things like that just have to be replaced over time.
Okay, so we've gone around to everybody. I think that of the priorities I'm hearing, we're resonating with employees as well. Some of us have a stronger opinion about giving a rollback for the higher property taxes. But a lot of this stuff is smaller and has other options for funding. With all the questions, as we started off, we got clarity from Blaine. We still had some other clarity, questions needed as far as understanding philosophy of taking some funds out that have been presented and displayed, and then us understanding, Jesse, your spreadsheet. We'll have that now to look at.
My intent to build off of theirs, just.
Or whatever, or a hybrid, whatever we like come up with you spreadsheet people. But it looks like Tuesday, we are going to need to meet.
Yeah.
But I think we're close. I feel that with it, that we've got some momentum in a lot of similar areas. And then there's little pebbles of stuff. But I don't think we need to keep going tonight. And I think that if next Tuesday, we've got a pretty full schedule.
Long day we got.
It is going to be a long day, but I don't think we need to make it a long night.
Yeah, we didn't meet, I agree.
Because we've got the charter officer reviews. We're getting in a mini work session retreat on workforce housing before we come here at 5:30. I appreciate you guys. I didn't see that on.
Is that necessary?
This is Kelly's schedule. I'm not the messenger for Kelly. I'm just doing the mayor pro tem here. But I am trying to organize my brain for Tuesday. It's supposed to be after charter officer reviews. He was grabbing what little bit of time we had between that while we're all together and here. And he said, as we talked about in the retreat, we needed more discussion on workforce housing, ARPA. So
It was
you guys.
verbiage of the seat.
Development.
It was the verbiage of
Workforce housing.
What did I say?
No, workforce.
I meant development. I'm sorry. Workforce development.
ARPA.
From the retreat. No, it wasn't you. I thought.
No, I just said it's ARPA though. It's an ARPA.
By the way.
ARPA workforce business.
Right.
Yeah, that one. Okay, thank you. I misspoke. But that is a time slot. So I would like everyone, as Blaine would say, talk among yourself. It's some of the conversations that need to be straightened out. Wait a minute. And Blaine, do you guys have some list of some specifics of sort of understanding where some of this might have taken money out and explaining, I don't know. You took notes down.
Sure,
It's not as nearly as much as what you went over to begin with.
No, this will be real quick.
But we can get that feedback and process it. No, I know you can, because you made good notes, and that's really good. I'll remember that on.
I'm good.
Okay, but the briefer you are, the better it will be.
Yeah,
I'm waving right now.
yeah. You can't count it. Okay.
I'll run out.
That's it. Is there anything?
Listen, I have a question.
Yeah.
Tell me that that workforce discussion on Tuesday, how much time is allocated for that?
I don't have that in front of me because I suggested to Kelly that since Judd wasn't gonna be there in the middle of the charter, discussions, that he should move lines. We had a block of time and then have the block of time for the, that's, you have to look at, I forget what email.
I got the calendar. I don't think
It's not, I doubt it's on the calendar.
It's not on the calendar.
It was one of Ellie's emails.
Is there something timely about this that needs to happen on?
I think you guys should email Kelly about that.
Well, I'm asking,
We need to meet at 5:30
Right.
for this.
Yes, yeah,
And we need our charter part, evaluation,
Evaluations.
discussions,
right.
happen. Pardon? Starts at 1:30. So look at that email or just tell Kelly, I'm not here to,
No,
I'm just,
I didn't get an email. That's all I'm
the
saying.
messenger.
yeah, you are sending daggers at the messenger and she doesn't even,
Kind of bubbling under.
It wasn't a bubbling under and it was a couple.
or a Friday update. It might even have been a Friday update.
Well, he did.
Down, it could have.
The other thing is, well, that's the one where he talked about, school district and all that stuff.
Yes, yes.
Changing the verbiage of this part. Think what they call it.
Okay, Patrick,
Who will not be here for next year?
and then, then there's a good point. Who is able to be here at 5:30? Staff, I know, you can raise your hand if you're not gonna be here. But you don't have to tell us. Patrick, you're not able to be here. John, you're not gonna be here.
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
Raise your hand if you're able to be here.
If you're not gonna be able to be here.
I don't want.
Okay, so John, okay, so you will need to articulate your priorities.
Your birthday weekend.
So that we know how to, as a reminder. But again, might not be unanimous on 6-6. We just need 6 votes to pass a recommended budget. And I think it's great that the bulk of this stuff is catching on from what we've been working hard on.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, wait a minute, question from the display master.
If there are spreadsheets that you have that have priorities or numbers, email them. We'll compile them into one major spreadsheet that we can share Tuesday, and then we can accept each item as we go.
Yeah, visually.
When do you need, so like, we've all discussed, so if we need to like adjust
Long
some.
week, it's been a long week.
When do you need that?
Monday, they find Monday before,
Okay,
early afternoon at the latest.
Okay.
And then I can
All right.
have time to work
So
with
if
you.
you have it by like noon Monday.
Document yourself. And can you have information?
Yes.
Yes.
The Kelly now, but.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yes. Sarah's gonna resend that email
Oh,
and you can send that to Traveling Kelly.
Can I?
Yep. Okay, I think we're,
Can I say one little?
Short. I said, well, I wanted to just say one little thing. One short thing.
we'll go for nobody's listening.
Well,
Go ahead. Wait a minute.
Listen, Tiffany, you'll listen.
Staff, will listen.
I just do want to, I mean, I think.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I just want to say that I think there's a lot of,
If y'all don't
let's
listen.
make it like a 60-second. There's a lot of overlap between what we're saying, hearing about long-term things and life cycle as well. I think what I'm observing is a big difference here is where we are with the millage rate. And we all have different points of view on this and such. But I do want to, refer everyone to page 16 of Manager Williams' attachment that shows for this $250,000 market value house that, yes, our taxes here in Clarke County are higher than in Oconee County, but they are lower than in Augusta, Richmond, Columbus, Muskogee, and Macon-Bibb, and considerably lower. And so I just want us to all think about that.
And if they want to do highlight bullets, but also there's very few $250,000 houses. All right, we need a motion to adjourn or Dexter, a second?
Second.
Commissioner Huell?
Yeah.
Everybody, let's vote. We're adjourned.
Aye.
It is done. Whoever's taking notes.
There's a lot of big difference in the 400,000.